Hello and welcome back to the second part of Metabolical. We've left it a couple of weeks, I guess.
I think it must be something like that.
Yeah,
that's it.
We all know that you wanted part 2, so here we are after much demand. So the first part we kind of introduced the basics of the book and what it was kind of looking at, and how it's touching on multiple areas, and that he needs to go into a lot of complexity to kind of approach this controversial topic because it's so intertwined with politics and big pharma and,
incentives and all sorts of things like that. Yeah,
absolutely. So now we're getting on to the second part, which is debunking chronic disease. And I guess we could just
get straight into it. Yeah, I think we're going to try and avoid too much of the biological components to this. One, because the only things we know is based upon the book, right? It's not like we're both biology graduates, etc. So we'll kind of leave that to people. If they want to read the book and understand the detail, then please do. But I thought this first part was quite interesting. So chapter 7 was called The Diseases That Aren't Diseases. And this is something that reminds me a bit of like the myth of mental illness, and we've spoken about many times before personally, where the way things get defined like control our reaction to it. So like the fact that things are defined as diseases when they might not be a disease, or they're constrained to a certain definition, changes the way we react and also the way we sort of treat them, right? It's a bit like with the mental illness stuff. We've created drugs around diseases. Is it the drug came first or was it the disease came first, sort of thing, where people almost find uses for the drugs by creating diseases that don't exist, almost, so to speak, right? Based upon the symptoms. We'll jump into it. So diseases tend to have difficult medical technical names that no mere mortal can pronounce. So they're often assigned more manageable monikers based on the name of the doctor who first described it, e.g. Alzheimer's disease, or its most famous patient, e.g. Lou Gehrig's.
Lou Gehrig's,
disease. I actually don't even know that one. What is Lou Gehrig's disease?
I've come across it, but I can't remember.
Okay. Sometimes it's even based on the country of origin, e.g. the Jamaican vomiting sickness. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Or the tissue of interest, e.g. foot-and-mouth disease, or on the symptoms expressed, fibromyalgia, something like that.
Fibromyalgia, I think.
Yeah. I thought that was quite interesting, just like this whole bit about the way that they're named, right? Like, there's like different sort of ways to name all these. Metabolic dysfunction, often referred to as the disease without a name, involves the impairment of 8 intracellular processes in the body, including those in the brain. And these processes are not independent and can interact with each other, leading to various outcomes. So I think the point here being is like he's claiming that we all, or like one of the biggest diseases that people suffer from in the modern day and age is this sort of disease without a name, this metabolic syndrome, and how we're kind of like, we're creating many sub-diseases when it's all really the same disease, so to speak. It's all the same 8 pathways that are failing that's causing all this.
And that different like combinations of them create different diseases that we name, but we don't actually look at the root causes, which are these subcellular pathways. Exactly
that. And that the metabolic syndrome is actually the main cause of these others. Like the other diseases are like a sub-symptom of this metabolic disease.
They are the root cause.
So when these processes are functioning properly, they can work in your favor, allowing you to live a long and healthy life. However, when they go awry, they can have detrimental effects, resulting in disabilities, depression, kidney failure, and premature death. Moreover, these processes often do not occur in isolation, but rather cluster together, exacerbating the impact on overall health. So this like clumping together is quite an interesting point, isn't it? Because it's like where diabetes and stuff comes in, your insulin response clumps together and then causes that, right?
And I think we kind of look at it the wrong way. Like, someone comes in with multiple different symptoms and we say those symptoms mean that the root cause is this disease, rather than being that these symptoms are an effect of these 8 subcellulars or some of the subcellular pathways that are going awry, which then lead to these symptoms, which then we've like classified as a disease. But we look at it the opposite way around. the root cause.
I think he mentioned something on the line of, and I can't remember whether it was this book or whether it was the Why We Get Fat book, but he talks about the idea that, you know, with obesity, people think they get fat, then they get sick. But the reality is they get sick first and then they get fat. So like the reason why they're fat is because of their obesity, not they don't get fat and then have obesity, right? It's obesity was caused before, and that's what led them to be fat.
Yeah.
We kind of get the logic in reverse, right?
Obesity is the symptom of a disease, right?
Exactly. Like the fat is like caused by, like you're sick before you get fat. Yeah, if that makes sense. You're not getting sick because you're fat. It's like the fat is actually a symptom of the sickness.
And that makes a lot of sense. Like, you know, we touched on it, and we probably will touch on it in that fat book that you talk about. I can't remember what it's called, but the idea of like a calorie not just being a calorie, and what happens to it when we ingest it. Like, there are multiple different functions that it could be used for. It's not just for storing fat. And if someone is getting obese, it may just suggest that the way that they kind of like receive a calorie and determine what it should be used for may be like dysfunctional, and so it's just constantly being put towards storing fat, and that's why people are suddenly, you know, get obese. I don't know, but like it would make sense that how, you know, when you're ill, the way that we receive calories is probably changes, right? Like
your body's just a set of like signals and reactions based upon signals that are sent, right? So like it's easy to see how if like a signal was sent the wrong way, or if there was like a change in the way things were interpreted within your body, that you could cause some people to gain fat quicker, right? This is kind of why people say there's like a genetic component to this in putting on weight, right? It's because people's body respond to signals differently. Like people are allergic to something, they respond to the signal of the thing which is causing the allergy differently than other people, right? It's the same premise. Like we we're different in that respect, all of us.
Absolutely.
But in this book, he's obviously talking about these 8 different ways. So I think we're touching them at like a very like, what's the word, like macro level rather than going into it, right? So I think number 1 was glycation. I'm pretty sure here. And I don't know, I never really heard of this before, but glycation is all to do with like browning, right? Like, and I think he talks about the idea of like caramelization as how to manage imagine how glycation is happening in your body. Where a Maillard reaction occurs.
Maillard or
Maillard?
I don't know.
But so and this is all to do with basically sugar intake and fructose, and it's to do with aging as well. So I haven't read any books on the longevity space, and obviously we had a few potentially in the pipeline, but I'm sure they'll probably go deeper into this glycation process. And then we had number 2, which was oxidative stress. So we actually hear this quite a lot, don't we, in terms of in popular culture about antioxidants and, you know, how they're good for your health. And this is all because your body experiences oxidative stress through, isn't it? I'm trying to figure out what it's through again. It's oxygen is a unique molecule view where the brain is dependent. That was it. It's because of the way of respiration, wasn't it? It was something like when it breaks down the oxygen in the air, it releases an oxygen radical, right? It was like a free positively charged. Yeah, exactly that. And if you don't have any antioxidants in your body, you can't remove that free radical, which is acidic, I think it might be, because it's a positive charge. I can't remember exactly. And read the book if you want more details on it. But I thought it was quite interesting. It kind of pieced together certain things for me, at least, that, you know, you hear all these words like antioxidants, and to actually understand the role of an antioxidant in your system was quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting that, like, you know, because in the current book that I'm reading, The Deep Nutrition, she talks about it a lot, and talking about how these free radicals, you know, they create this cascading effect where it like basically destroys cells that it like passes through, and until an antioxidant is able to bind with the oxygen molecule, then to stop the process, you know, it just causes havoc. And, you know, she goes on to say, and to be fair, he says it in this book as well, like, you know, that vegetable oils are terrible because they release so many free oxygen radicals. And, you know, there are multiple foods that include antioxidants, but what's kind of funny is that a lot of them are like stereotypical hunter-gatherer foods. I mean, things that we would have always had. And, you know, obviously back then you didn't have
vegetables, right?
Vegetables, berries, beans, you know, the fruits.
You're saying here anything with vibrant colors is a good rule of thumb.
Like basically red stuff, especially which I don't know why, but it's just very interesting to think that, like, you know, we would have constantly been like ingesting foods that are high in antioxidants.
But also, as you both know from this book and others, that a lot of these hunter-gatherers don't actually suffer from any of these syndromes, illnesses that the modern day individual does. So therefore, there has to be something to be said for obviously the dietary change.
Yeah,
and like you just said, this could be one of the main reasons that they're already getting plenty of antioxidants in their diet, whereas these days we seem to sort of be, we're definitely not eating as much fruit and veg, let's put it that way, or beans or whatever. So we're eating a lot more refined stuff without this. Therefore, we're causing all this oxidative damage, and we're not, what's the word, fighting back with our diet.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. And then number 3, we had mitochondrial dysfunction. I can't remember exactly what the cause of the mitochondrial dysfunction was. I remember they went into this interesting bit of history where the mitochondria obviously has a separate DNA, and that actually it was hypothesized as like a bacteria that might have created a symbiotic relationship with us as humans, or that as in animals as well, right? Because every animal uses mitochondria. But it's this idea that it was actually technically like an alien. It's not really built within you. It was kind of like came in first. And it's to do with it doesn't share your DNA at all. It's kind of weird to think that these things are like living within us but powering us. It's
like a symbiotic relationship between the two. It's like they are able to survive through us, and we're able to survive through them, because they're what is responsible for basically creating energy. Which I think we should probably go into a little bit. So like this first bit. So consider an old style factory powered by coal burning furnace. The furnace requires a steady supply of coal brought in by railroads and skilled furnace stokers who work in shifts to keep it fed. When the rate of coal arrives matches the offload rate by the stokers, the factory operates at full capacity, producing high quality products. So obviously this is a metaphor for how it works. However, if the furnace stokers are unable to generate enough energy due to age, illness, or other factors, the furnace will not burn at full capacity, resulting in subpar product output. Additionally, if the railroad cars filled with coal start arriving faster than the stokers can unload, the factory floor becomes overwhelmed, leading to shutdown. So you can already start to get an idea of how, our cells will probably create a byproduct, right? Because there will be times where there's too much or too little, and we have something left over that we need to try and get rid of. And then another mechanism is at play, like dealing with that leftover. So now imagine both of these issues occurring simultaneously. This is similar to mitochondrial dysfunction, where the cell's energy production process is impaired. Chronic disease is essentially mitochondrial dysfunction, and mitochondrial dysfunction is chronic disease. They are interconnected and synonymous with each other. Mitochondria, fascinatingly, are bacteria that made a decision long ago to reside within animal cells rather than braving the harsh external environment on their own. Bacteria were adept at generating energy, while animal cells excelled at defending against invaders. This symbiotic arrangement allowed them to thrive together. That's exactly what we were saying. Even today, mitochondria possesses their own distinct DNA and genetic programming separate from the human DNA housed in the cell nucleus. However, like shift workers, mitochondria are prone to dysfunction and damage due to oxidative stress as they age. So now we are tying in the previous thing that we were talking about, these oxygen radicals and how they can disrupt this kind of mitochondrial functioning. The most effective stimulus for generating new and healthy mitochondria is exercise. However, even with optimal mitochondrial function, a poor diet cannot be outrun. When glucose and oxygen availability, as well as mitochondrial capacity, are well matched, cellular processes run smoothly. Using the analogy of a coal factory, if glucose influx exceeds the mitochondria's processing capacity, the excess can overwhelm the system, and the mitochondria are forced to convert excess pyruvic acid into fat, a process known as de novo lipogenesis. And now we can kind of start to see how this probably will lead to obesity, right? Because this functioning is overwhelmed and it's starting to become dysregulated. And so like we were just talking about before, calories coming in and your body doesn't know how to deal with it so much because it's overwhelmed. It starts to just being like, fuck, we'll just store it there for a moment. It's almost like, how people like clean their room and it's just like overwhelming. Like, I'm just going to shove this shit in the closet for now and like get back to it later.
Yeah. And hope it gets dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But then you realize you keep doing that and there's less and less room. So then this last point, so it's worth noting that the health of mitochondria plays a crucial role in your lifespan. Organs that require abundant mitochondria and energy production, such as the brain and hormone-secreting organs, are particularly vulnerable to mitochondrial dysfunction, as neurotransmission and hormone secretion are energy-intensive processes.
Yeah. I was thinking as well, you didn't mention it in the book, but I wonder as well, part of, when you have when you eat too much food, for example, or too much sugar, you get into a sort of, what's the word, like food coma. And I'm wondering if that's something to do with your mitochondria going into overdrive, and then you're going through this new lipo, whatever it's called, process. And that's where you feel the fatigue, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but I can imagine overwhelming your system with whether it's processed foods or just too much food in general, or too much sugar. These things are all probably likely to have an impact. And then there's the next one, which is number 4, insulin resistance. Did you want to?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So insulin is commonly viewed as the hormone that combats diabetes by lowering blood glucose levels and preventing microvascular complications like eye, kidney, and nerve diseases. However, this is only part of the story. Insulin's primary role is actually to store energy for future use, akin to saving for a rainy day. In your body, only 2 organs, the liver and adipose tissue, require insulin for proper function. When there is an excess of insulin, it can impede glucose clearance from the bloodstream into the tissues, leading to hypoglycemia or inadequate glucose delivery to the brain, which can cause symptoms like dizziness, unconsciousness, seizures, or even death in severe cases. However, in modern times, the opposite issue is actually more prevalent. Various cells in the body become resistant to insulin, a condition known as insulin resistance. And when certain cells are unable to take up glucose, they experience a state of starvation, resulting in dysfunction of the affected organs. Insulin resistance in the liver or muscles can cause glucose to accumulate in the blood, leading to diabetes. Elevated insulin levels contribute to cellular dysfunction, ultimately leading to chronic diseases, morbidity, and premature mortality. Insulin resistance is a central issue in metabolic syndrome, and there can be various reasons for its occurrence. However, processed food is widely recognized as the predominant factor contributing to insulin resistance. So yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? You're starting to see how all these kind of components are or these subcellular kind of pathways are connected. And how
of course they're all connected, right? It's all a big system, right? So if one's dysregulated, then they're all going to be some form of partially dysregulated, right?
It starts a cascade, and so here, like we were just talking about before with the mitochondrial dysfunction, mitochondria requires glucose to be able to do its unstacking the coal, right? And then processing the coal. But if it doesn't have that, then it can't do this. And then you start getting obesity and you're having insulin resistance at the same time. So now you're starting to see this bigger picture.
The fuel's not even getting to the cells now because the cells aren't the insulin's not shuttling the glucose there.
And throughout this book, he very much insulin resistance is very prevalent throughout the whole book. And he says a lot of the issues today are very much to do with having this problem, and how, it's almost like the start of all of these issues, right? The very, very root cause, because he goes on about insulin resistance in the population a lot, and how you can imagine that, if that starts to get affected, then the mitochondria gets affected, and then obesity starts to rise, and then there are multiple other, issues. Yeah.
So number 5, you got membrane integrity. So the outer membrane of every cell serves as a protective barrier containing its contents. However, when these membranes are damaged, it can result in the release of cellular contents, leading to cell dysfunction and eventual death. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? If there's a hole in the ship, you're going to sink, kind of thing. If there's a hole in your cell. So there are 2 primary mechanisms through which cell membranes can be damaged. Damage to the lipids themselves, caused by toxins or oxidative stress. Ideally, cell membrane should be flexible and malleable, similar to a balloon, which is referred to as a membrane fluidity. When membranes lose their flexibility, they can rupture. I think that idea there is more useful than the sinking ship, like a balloon. If you pop a balloon, everything spills out, right? So unsaturated fats are generally considered healthier than saturated fats, as they are less problematic in relation to metabolic syndrome. However, there are 2 issues with unsaturated fats fats. First, the cis double bonds in unsaturated fats are susceptible to damage by toxins and oxidative stress, which can oxidize these double bonds and release oxygen radicals. So once again, like the damage itself releases more oxygen radicals. It's like a spiraling effect, right? So second, when unsaturated fats are heated beyond their smoking point, the cis double bond can undergo a flip, resulting in the formation of trans fats, which are harmful to cells. Although the FDA has banned trans fats in commercial foods, it is still possible to unintentionally produce them when cooking at home. And my understanding is, I want to say olive oil is one of those. My mum's forever telling me that olive oil actually has a really low point of heating point there. It actually turns into, I don't know if it turns into a trans fat, but I know it just definitely becomes unhealthy in comparison to other, sort of like coconut oil, for example.
So interesting. So like, I'm surprised here that it's saying unsaturated fats are generally considered healthier, because I think that's the kind of notion that we've been led to believe by these huge, corporations, when it's actually the opposite, as in like saturated fats, when we think of like, animal fats, are actually much better because they do have a higher burning point. And I think in the book that I'm currently reading, she talks about the different burning points of different vegetable oils. And I think actually olive oil is a bit higher, especially like extra virgin. I think it depends if it's been refined. Because there are different processes.
So like extra steps. Virgin olive oil would be worse.
Yeah,
sorry.
I think that's better. I think it got a higher
a
higher burning point. But it's interesting because then she was talking about so for instance, sunflower oil or rapeseed oil, all of these ones, and they're so vulnerable that even to get them to a point of being oil, you have to burn them, in which you've already released the oxygen radicals. So it's not even like when you use them, when you first start cooking, you're releasing them. It's because they've already basically been released. Like you can get them through a certain process. I think it's called like a plug or something, where it like squeezes them very slowly, but like it's not cost efficient, so no one ever does that. But yeah, so I think like vegetable oils here are predominantly responsible for oxidative stress, releasing these oxygen radicals. And here it's saying that, these oxygen radicals, like I was kind of saying at the beginning, these create this cascade where they damage the cell membrane, in this case, and then that membrane like releases all of its cellular contents, which lead to the cell death. Yeah, that's interesting.
No, it is. And then you got inflammation next. I feel like, do you want to take this one? I feel like also you might have something to add from the deep nutrition. I don't know if that talks a lot about inflammation or not, or if you got to that point yet.
I don't know. We'll see. So foreign invaders such as viruses and bacteria can directly damage cells in our body. In response, our body has developed an inflammatory response where various white blood cells are recruited to release toxins like oxygen radicals and cytokines, which have killing activity to destroy the invaders. Isn't it interesting that our body sees the function of oxygen radicals and utilizes them to kill something, but yet we're ingesting all these foods that are just creating it by themselves and releasing havoc. However, there are several downsides to this inflammatory response. Normal tissues can also be damaged in the process, leading to long-term damage even after the invader is cleared. Number two, the inflammatory process can sometimes be triggered against the body's own tissue, as certain body tissues may molecularly resemble foreign invaders, a phenomenon known as molecular mimicry.
Especially in my head as well, if they're damaged, right? They might
100%.
It's like, oh wow, these are these aren't like normal cells. They're damaged, right? Crazy.
Absolutely. And I think she actually touched on that in the book. I can't quite remember, but she was saying that something distorts the way they look, and then they look more like foreign invaders. And obviously that, when your body starts to attack itself, that can lead to cancer, essentially, not cancer, autoimmune diseases, right? It thinks that something is like a foreign invader, so it keeps attacking it. And then number three, so imbalances in the gut environment can cause harmful bacteria to proliferate, leading to the predominance of pathogenic bacteria such as Streptococcus mutans in the mouth, leading to dental caries, which is fillings basically. The resulting inflammatory reaction can also cause breaks in the intestinal barrier, allowing toxins and bacteria to pass into the bloodstream, leading to liver inflammation and insulin resistance, a condition known as leaky gut. And number 4, body fat, whether subcutaneous or visceral, so visceral being around the organs, subcutaneous being on the external, can release inflammatory lipids such as palmitate, which can further drive the inflammatory response. So all of these, like, your body knows how to defend against bacteria and viruses, but think about, your body doing that, and then on top of that you're ingesting foods that do the same exact thing. I mean, like, you're basically pumping it into hyperdrive. It's probably not very good for your body, and especially, like, it's very interesting in the current book that I'm reading. She talks about the kind of inflammatory response and these free radicals, and she even talks about, like, if you smack your head, it releases these oxygen radicals, if you get a concussion or whatnot. And so it's important to then eat, like, have a diet that's very high in antioxidants, because it kind of stops that process, because your body, like, whether it's a bacteria, virus, or whether it's been smacked around, it's kind of engaging in this free oxygen issue, and that's
engaging repair.
And you can understand why now that, like, it's, which I never understood this, but so many people don't change their diet when they're ill. Right, as in, like, they continue to eat sugar and, like, processed foods when they're ill. I mean, like, the first point, like, I've always been like this, but, like, the first point of call is, okay, you resort back to, like, eating vegetables and fruits, raw foods. And do you know why?
Because antioxidants,
exactly. So your body can, like, isolate it, target it towards that bacterium
is food, right? Like, it's, 100%. I mean, this is kind of one of the overarching themes of this whole entire book, really, is that food is medicine. Like, food is a drug, right? Like, it's if you define drug as something that, like, has an impact on, like, your biology, right, or your physiology or whatever, food therefore comes into that criterion, right? It influences how you feel, how your body operates, right? It's crazy that we still don't believe that, taking a pill of paracetamol is better for you than fucking having a really healthy, vegetable heavy dinner or whatever.
Actually, I wonder also, off the back of this, why fasting can be really good. So let's say you have you're ill, or you have bacteria or whatever. A lot of people fast when they're doing this. I wonder whether, if you're eating, because also if you look at a lot of animals, they fast when they're ill as well. And I wonder whether, because your body is trying to recruit all of these, like, processes that engage these, like, free radicals to target these viruses and bacteria until it's gone, right? And if we're eating stuff, although it may be reducing the damage on other cells, like it was just saying here, that an issue of the byproduct of releasing these free radicals is that it can hit other areas that it wasn't meant to. Maybe when we eat, we're protecting against that, but it may also diminish the level of intensity that we're targeting towards the virus and the bacteria. So maybe by fasting, you're allowing a more, like, intense, focused amount onto the virus. I don't know. But
my understanding was twofold for that. Like, I think we'll get into it in a minute with the autophagy. My understanding is when you go into, like, fasting, your body goes into, like, autophagy, and, like, your body goes around and destroys all the sort of, like, weak and injured cells. Like, it literally just goes around and destroys them. So it removes all this, like, debris, so to speak, which could be causing further dysregulation just because it's there in the way. And then another one was the fact that sometimes, obviously, if you eat bad food, it can keep the cells that are, like, damaged alive, because they'll still be, like, respiring or whatever. They'll still be creating energy. Like, the whole point, for example, with fasting and treating cancer was it stops cancer from feeding off the glucose in your body. That at least was my understanding.
No, absolutely. It's really interesting, actually, now that I'm kind of understanding that.
In fact, we will get onto that in a second, actually, because number 7 is epigenetics, and then number 8 is autophagy. So, so number 7. So while much research is focused on identifying genetic factors associated with metabolic syndrome, studies indicate that only about 15% of metabolic syndrome can be attributed to genetics, while the majority is influenced by environmental factors. However, it's important to note that our environmental factors can also impact genes through a phenomenon called epigenetics. I've still never really got my head around epigenetics. I'm sure you probably have a better idea from your course and stuff, but epigenetics refers to changes in the areas surrounding our genes that can cause them to be turned on or off, often inappropriately. These changes can alter responses to various pathologies and over time can contribute to the development of different diseases. In other words, our environment can influence how our genes are expressed, leading to changes in our health outcomes. This highlights the complex interplay between genetics and the environment in the development of metabolic syndrome and other diseases. While genetic factors play a role, environmental factors including lifestyle, diet, stress, and other external influences also have a significant impact on our health and can shape our genetic expression through epigenetic changes. This is kind of what this whole book's about, right? Because the fact that, the bad diet, these lifestyle changes, which were never about in the hunter-gatherer age, has caused these sort of genetic changes or expressions. We weren't meant to be. Our bodies weren't meant to be operating like this, but they are.
Yeah,
you've got to ask the question of why.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole epigenetics take is so interesting. So a way to kind of describe, so you have your strand of DNA, and your strand of DNA is wrapped around these things called histones, and essentially, the tighter it's wrapped, the more difficult it is to express a gene, because it's kind of tightly hidden, right? It's it's wrapped around something else. So there are certain enzymes or molecules or whatnot, that goes and interacts with it and releases the kind of strand to make it loose, so that then it can be expressed or not, right? And a lot of this kind of process, and when it is actually turned on or off. When it's turned on, obviously your gene can create those proteins that is required for whatever function it is. And this whole process is kind of known as methylation. And what's interesting in the current book is she says that, to take it one step further, is that we're currently living in a bit of a paradigm where we constantly attribute all of these issues as genetic, right? And that, basically you're born with this, so you have a much higher prevalence to this. And she's saying it's actually more to do with epigenetics. It's yes, okay, you might be, but actually it's about how they're kind of engaging in the environment. And if you think about it, if we're told a narrative where we just have this, it's genetic, well, we can't do anything about it. And so the only thing that we can do about it is whether there's a fucking pill that says, oh, this will solve the issue, rather than us telling a narrative where actually a lot of this is environmental and you can do a lot about it, right? You can change it. Absolutely. And so, lo and behold, this whole process, this methylation process that helps regulate epigenetics, is fueled by what? Nutrients, nutrition and exercise. So if that's the case, well, then all you have to do is basically eat well, have good nutrition, exercise, have good sleep, and most of your genes are going to be regulated properly, right, to the way that they are. And it's we're just coming back to the very basics. It's sleep, eat well, and exercise. And it's
a classic wishful thinking, isn't it, as well? Everybody wants things to be easy. Everybody wants to be able to take a pill and lose weight, easy option, be cured, rather than put in the work to realize what they're doing. And to be honest, there is a factors of it that is obviously some of the food and stuff's been designed to literally be addictive, and some of these people can actually not help themselves almost. To be honest, we both know that obviously the stuff that we're talking about here, the processed food and stuff, which is obviously causing all these diseases and syndromes or whatever you want to call it, is actually more appealing and tasty than the fucking vegetables, and that's just, they've been designed to be that way, literally. But it just goes to show that it's never really been that complicated, right? It's the same with all that gym advice and stuff, eat well, sleep, and go lift, as the best gym advice to get in good shape. But people love to be no, you got to take this protein shake, you got to have a 500 grams of protein, you got to do this and that. It's no, do you not really? Obviously you probably should increase your protein intake by a little bit, but apparently it's been grossly what's the word, overestimated. Everybody says it has to be way more than it actually is, and realistically the best thing for it is just always sleep, recovery, diet, the stuff that I feel deep down we all know logically makes sense, but we obviously can't bring ourselves to accept it, because I guess it means you have to face yourself in the mirror and accept some cold hard truths that you obviously you've been subpar for a long period of time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's
that you basically caused. Well, not that you caused it yourself, because I don't think that's fair for some people. But but your environment's partly to blame, and you actually do have a choice and a decision to shape that environment, or you have the ability to change that environment going forward.
Absolutely. And in a way, I would think that's. I would think it's kind of more liberating in a sense, because you've been told that you now have control over it. right? Rather than it being constantly just in the hands of medical professionals who say this is the way forward. And that's the thing, right? Like it's,
or in the hands of your genes, because you've just accepted the fact that apparently your genes are what cause you to be overweight, for example, or it's your genes, it's a genetic illness. Well, as we're finding out now, it's actually the way they're expressed, and they're expressed through the environment. And you've created this environment where they're being expressed in this way. It's like you said, it should be liberating. It should be like, God, you as an individual or somebody who's done who's been through all this, like you've been having all this medication, but you haven't tried one of the most simple ones of all, is just, move back to like good diet, eat lots of vegetables, work out, etc. Right? But it's funny because obviously, like as we said, that never gets prescribed. It's never like go to the doctor and they're like, okay, well, eat a healthy diet, eat more veg, work out, that's it. It's like, you have to give me a pill because that's what I've come to expect is the result.
Exactly.
Rather than just like,
you get paid on prescription, right?
The American system. In fact, what's funny? I think is actually in that mixed signals book I was telling about, like the incentive system set up in America for the medical profession in general is crazy. Like the way they're literally like you said, they're paid for prescribing stuff, and they're also paid based upon the amount of like x-rays and stuff they do as well, and also they're scared of obviously being sued if they don't take the necessary precautions. They're always incentivized therefore to not just financially but also like, well, I guess you could argue being sued is financially as well, but it's more like reputationally also to like behave in a way that like promotes doing things that aren't necessary, right? And it's whereas like they're in the business of fixing symptoms, right? And this is like one of the big takeaways as well. Then the business of not solving the root cause. They're treating rather than solving it, because that would dry up the whole entire industry. I guess in a way they're also lucky in the sense that then humans are, or just I guess animals in general, are so guided by their biology that it obviously feels good to be doing all these things that are like slowly killing us. Do you get what I mean? Like
there's an element
they're lucky in that sense because they're like the things that are causing these things happen to be the things that people want to do because our biology makes us want to do it, even though it's bad for us. If that makes sense. Like, whereas if it was like, I don't know, if it was the opposite and it was so addictive to be really healthy, like it was just amazing. Vegetables, the best thing ever. Like, do you know what I mean? There would never be an issue. No problem at all.
Absolutely.
We're almost like betrayed by our own biology, but then we're also betrayed with the fact that we figured out ways to hijack our biology in a way that like addicts us to things or gets
almost too smart for our own good in a sense.
Like it's like I mean, there was like, I can't remember what the fucking quote is, but it's something like about capitalism and like being scared of what people actually want. Like you give people what they want, but you should actually be scared about what people want because it's never good for them. It's
because it's not normally what they need.
Of course. We chase obviously what's most pleasurable and what's feels good rather than what's actually good in the long run, right? And that's sadly the way the biology works. And you could think the same with like all these. Have you ever seen these like weird things on like animal programs like Planet Earth where they have these like deceptive like mating strategies where like a spider pretends to be a female and it comes over and eats them? It's like there's that type of thing where it feels so good, but you're being deceived.
Exactly.
And we're all being deceived by our own biology because we have like certain signals and cues that like excite us, right? And then sadly these things aren't best for us, right? And then they could be hijacked by bad actors or bad systems or bad I guess it just slowly evolves over time, right? Like I don't think it's, we said this before, I don't think it's one thing where it's like a global conspiracy of like people, but it's a global incentive system with misaligned incentives to the general public, right? I think that's what it is, and that people are blind to it because they don't want to admit, look in the mirror, that this is kind of the way things are, or the way things have gone.
Absolutely. I think what's also interesting, like it's not in this book, but I think it's relevant. Is that epigenetics, right? Like epigenetic tags, these things that like the environment are affecting your genes get passed on. They literally get, so unlike
they get coded into your DNA afterwards, right? They kind of get remembered, right? Almost like memory. Is that
so they're like tags, right? Yeah. So they're like genetic memory. So they don't, epigenetic tags never affect the DNA sequence, right?
Okay.
So epi actually means above. So if you think about like you've got your gene sequence and then things interacting with it above, and that's how this gene is expressed and that one's not, and this one is,
Okay.
So it's above the genetic sequence. Now, obviously, when like how genetics works with when you make, when you have a child, is there's Mendelian genetics, right? So you have multiple variations of, or you have two variations of a gene, so does your partner, and there's like a pool of genes, and then whatever one is passed down, right? There's two that are passed down. The dominant normally gets passed down, right? That's Mendelian genetics. It's not Lamarckism, which is that like all of your genes are just passed down. But actually epigenetics is more Lamarckism. I think he was like the one who put forward this idea that all your genes are passed down, because all your epigenetics tags are passed down pretty much. And so, and in this current book that I'm reading, she talks about like how, terrible Western diets really affect children. And, you're starting to see all these metabolic issues that seem as if they're genetic because they're born with them, but they're actually like these epigenetic tags that have been passed on.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah, so genes are like being dysregulated. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And so, and she has like, but like, it's just, it just goes to show how it affects you and future generations at a kind of genetic level. And it's just, it's fascinating.
It's crazy actually that it goes that deep,
Yeah. But anyway, so on to the last part, so autophagy. So what happens when there's no more space to dispose of garbage? Or worse, what if there's no one to collect the trash? It's much better to clear the garbage rather than letting it pile up. This principle applies to the human body as well. Clearing out biological waste products is a vital process known as autophagy, which plays a crucial role in healthy aging, especially in the brain. The brain, being the most energy-demanding organ, generates a significant amount of mitochondrial waste and oxidative stress. However, the brain has limited space for waste storage, so it has to be efficient and rapidly remove debris. This is where sleep comes in. During sleep, the intracerebral pressure decreases, allowing small pores called lymphatics to open up in the brain. This allows for the slow and steady removal of damaged cellular components into the bloodstream for disposal. In essence, every night is garbage night for the brain during sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, it's like having your brain's garbage collectors on strike.
And it makes sense that why you feel like groggy the next day and stuff, and the brain fog and stuff like that. It's basically just excess waste products still in your brain that you can't get.
Absolutely, there's always going to be a waste product, and that's kind of what they were talking about at the very beginning with the browning, the caramelizing, what's called the glycation, right? There's always going to, like, as we age, there's going to be some kind of toxin that is released from processing something, and so you need to have like an efficient kind of removal system, and that's kind of the cerebral fluid in the brain in particular, right? That like takes all the toxins away. But then obviously you've got issues where, let's say some of those toxins start to clump together, and let's say some of them are quite sticky and they stick to, I don't know, areas in the brain. Well, this is kind of like, well, there's theories about it, but this is kind of what leads to, Alzheimer's or dementia or, and a lot of that you can kind of trace back to these kind of processed foods and the toxins that they release or the impact they have on the body.
So yes, the summary of this is then, as you can see, none of these 8 processes mentioned inherently cause diseases. In fact, when they are functioning properly, they contribute to longevity and good health. However, if a few of these processes go awry, it can result in a shorter and less enjoyable life. It's crucial to maintain the proper functioning of these processes for overall well-being. And that just, it kind of makes sense. If any one of these are sort of going out the window, they're all going to sort of impact each other, right? It's as we said, it's all connected.
Exactly.
So I remember this next bit. This is quite interesting. So we're moving on to chapter 8, which is checkpoints Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, nutrient sensing, and chronic disease. Food drives both illness and wellness. It's the poison and the antidote. Metabolic syndrome could colloquially be redefined as cells eating badly, as every one of the 8 subcellular pathologies is made worse by providing the wrong food in the wrong place at the wrong time. The next bit, oxygen is so overrated. So do living organisms need oxygen? While plants don't require oxygen for their survival, as they produce oxygen as a byproduct during photosynthesis, animal cells, including regular cells and cancer cells, do need oxygen for their normal functioning. However, an interesting observation made by German biochemist Otto Warburg in 1924 was that cancer cells can grow without oxygen, which is pretty mad, isn't it? Despite the fact that regular cells need oxygen, cancer cells which divide rapidly can thrive in low oxygen environments, such as the gut, where oxygen levels are typically low. This is because the intestinal microbiome, which is comprised of bacteria, has adapted to function without oxygen. Many bacteria in our gut, known as obligate anaerobes, can grow and survive without oxygen and do not possess mitochondria, the cellular structures responsible for oxygen-dependent energy production. In fact, cells that are in growth phase without access to oxygen may not even need mitochondria, as they can produce enough energy through alternative pathways that generate lactic acid as a byproduct. Increased production of lactic acid is associated with certain conditions like post-exercise cancer, mitochondrial diseases, and the metabolic syndrome, all of which involve mitochondrial dysfunction or lack of oxygen availability. I thought that was just an interesting
it is
little tidbit. Like cancer cells don't even need oxygen. It's crazy. It's like,
which just means that they can, they can be very prolific.
But it's also interesting from a space thing, because obviously I've always been, I don't know about you, but I thought the whole point of like living on planet Earth was saying like, there needs to be oxygen for living creatures, or it needs to be carbon, and it's just goes to show that some cells don't even need it. So
yeah, you could imagine that on some planets there's probably some kind of organisms that don't require oxygen whatsoever.
Yeah, some kind of like
on the other route,
alternative system. Yeah.
So two metabolic programs, one for growth and one for burning. Cells undergoing growth require various building blocks to divide and create new cells. These include lipids for membranes, ribose for DNA and RNA, and amino acids for proteins. There are two main pathways that provide these building blocks. The first pathway is called glycolysis, which prepares glucose for use in structural components. The end product of glycolysis is pyruvic acid, which can either be used for burning in the next stage or leaving the cell as lactic acid. One notable feature of glycolysis is that it can generate 2 ATPs, adenosine triphosphate, which are energy molecules without requiring oxygen. The second pathway is known as the Krebs cycle, which occurs in the mitochondria. In the Krebs cycle, pyruvic acid is completely burned, resulting in the production of 28 ATPs and carbon dioxide. When the goal is burning energy, such as during aerobic exercise, both glycolysis and the Krebs cycle work together. However, when the goal is to provide structural components for growth, as in cases like blood flow restriction or high-intensity interval training for building muscle mass, only glycolysis is needed and the pyruvic acid is diverted for building muscle. Both glycolysis and the Krebs cycle are adaptive pathways that allow cells to meet their energy and structural needs, depending on the specific requirements of growth or burning energy. And that kind of it's kind of interesting how that kind of starts to bring in exercise, because obviously this book is predominantly about nutrition, but it's starting to talk about the different, energy systems and how they work, and how some are for oxygen, some aren't, and some are for building muscle. It's just really interesting. I think it's provides a good foundation for understanding those kind of energy processes. Yeah.
And then the next part, we're going into the different checkpoints. So checkpoint alpha, and these are, I believe, different forms of enzymes that he labeled as sort of highly important. I'm looking down here. I'm wondering if it's best to go into the detail of these, because this is proper. Looking at this is
might be quite intense.
Then there's I think there's a bit at the end summarizing it. So the enzyme checkpoints together explain how the cell metabolizes energy. So the P13-kinase, which is checkpoint A, I believe, imports glucose into the cell. AMP-kinase, which is checkpoint B, directs the energy to mitochondria for burning. Checkpoint C, mTOR, determines whether a cell lives or dies. Cell metabolism is primarily driven by the chemical signals that reach the cell, particularly the mitochondria, and not by calories. The enzymes P13-kinase, AMP-kinase, and mTOR play crucial roles in regulating cell growth, burning of energy, and determining cell fate. These enzymes are influenced by the chemicals present in the cell rather than simply the calorie content of the diet, challenging conventional notions about nutrition. The traditional focus on calories as the sole determinant of metabolism is being redefined by our understanding of these enzymes and their intricate roles in cellular processes. It is becoming clear that it is not just the quantity of calories, but also the quality and composition of the diet that significantly impacts cell metabolism and overall cell health.
That's interesting. So if we understand how cell function works, and then how like we were talking about with the 8 subcellular pathways, and how those dysregulation of them can lead to cell dysfunction, and that's predominantly based on not just the quantity of what you're eating, but the actual quality or the nutrients within it, and how so it starts to change our understanding of what calories are, and more to do with what they're made up of.
Well, for sure. Like, yeah, I mean, let's go like a tiny bit into this stuff.
Yeah.
So, for example, this checkpoint alpha, then you got phospho. Oh my God, I'm not going to just go P13 kinase.
Oh my God,
way, right?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, Jesus. The enzyme known as P13 kinase plays a crucial role in opening the floodgates of glucose entry into the cell. When there is an abundance of glucose available, the cell can obtain fuel to power itself, even without the need for mitochondria or oxygen. This explains why cancer cells and fetal cells, which require high levels of energy, often have elevated levels of P13 kinase. Insulin, a hormone that regulates blood sugar levels, plays a significant role in driving cancer cell growth by facilitating the entry of glucose into the cell. Insulin acts like a key, unlocking the door to allow glucose to enter the cell. And P13 kinase determines the extent to which the door swings open. Together, insulin and P13 kinase work in tandem to flood the cell with glucose, providing the energy needed for cell growth and proliferation. And what's interesting, obviously, here is like there's obviously certain processes that allow these things to happen, and therefore, once again, it's the same thing we got about earlier. If one of these things stops or is interrupted by diet or by this oxidative stress or whatnot, then things aren't going to work properly, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can imagine that, insulin resistance, right? Where they can't basically unlock the door, right? So then that's the start of all these major issues, because it's not even the process isn't even starting.
I mean, even just looking at this next point is quite interesting. Well, so checkpoint Bravo with the AMP-kinase. So after glucose enters the cell, the next step is determining whether the cell needs to burn the glucose for energy. This is where the second checkpoint, AMP-kinase, comes into play. AMP-kinase acts as the cell's fuel gauge, distinguishing between a full or empty energy state. Activities such as exercise or the use of anti-diabetes drug metformin can stimulate AMP-kinase, helping to maintain optimal function in mitochondria and improving insulin sensitivity. On the other hand, factors that impair AMP-kinase can lead to fat synthesis and worsen insulin resistance. Among the various factors that can impair AMP-kinase is sugar-rich foods, which have been shown to have the most significant impact. And that kind of makes sense, this idea that this is kind of like working out if the cell needs more energy. Or, like you said, it's a fuel gauge. It's like, this cell's empty, this cell's not. Come give me more glucose. Come bring that into the cell, right? And you can imagine if that's misfiring, right, because of damage or misreading signals, that that's how you might get fat. It's like, keep giving me glucose, or keep doing this, taking it out of the body. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that type of thing.
Absolutely.
It's quite easy to imagine how these things would cause damage, or like could cascade if things got out of hand.
And that you can kind of understand, or see how that impacts metabolism in a way, because some people's metabolisms may be like very, maybe not even like better, but maybe like more geared towards one than the other, right? Like, we're both ones that have quite high metabolisms, and so we burn a lot of energy rather than like store a lot, whereas other people may swing the other way, or based on diet it may disrupt either or. And maybe why like some people find it very difficult to lose weight even though they work out, because there might be something dysregulated with that area. That's interesting. Well, then we might as well do this last bit as well.
Do you want me to do it, or do you want to?
I'll go ahead. So checkpoint Charlie, so mTOR. When it comes to a cell's fate, whether it divides, remains in quiescent state, or undergoes autophagy, cellular self-degradation, the third checkpoint, mTOR, plays a crucial role. mTOR acts as a signaling pathway that determines a cell's commitment to growth, quiescence, or death, and thus plays a pivotal role in regulating cell fate. Can we look at am I just stupid, but what is quiescence? I almost want
I'm going in, man. So it's inactivity or dormancy.
Fine. All right. mTOR serves as a major regulator of growth in animals and is the key link between the internal state of the cell and its fate. It determines whether a cell lives or dies, and thus plays a critical role in autophagy, the process of clearing out cellular debris. Notably, mTOR is also the target of many current longevity drugs, as it is considered the holy grail of cell fate. Diet has a significant impact on mTOR activity. A high-protein diet can activate mTOR, promoting cell division, development of lean body mass, insulin sensitivity, and bone and cardiovascular health. In contrast, caloric deprivation of low ATP levels can reduce mTOR activity, making growth an impossibility. In summary, mTOR serves as the crucial checkpoint that determines a cell's commitment to growth, quiescence, or death, and is highly sensitive to diet and energy levels, making it a central player in regulating cell fate and the potential target for longevity interventions. Yeah, so you can start to see how all these three checkpoints play a massive role, and they're just like different time stamps down the like whole process. And how crucial.
Well, they're all crucial like elements of the whole process of like creating energy and like the body functioning, right? And it's just interesting to know that obviously these can be dysregulated as well. And obviously what we're saying here, for example, with I think it was the AMP-kinase, obviously high sugar diets can cause dysregulation. It's obviously important to for your cells to know where their energy status is, if they need to be filled up with more energy or they need to to not be continuously filled up more, like the whole point we were saying earlier, where like it's like a coal factory. Do you need more stuffed in there, right? It's that type of thing. So we can move on to chapter 9, and I don't really know if I really actually want to do this one, because this one I think is more about reading the book, because this book was all about assembling the clues to diagnose yourself. So it's more like,
that's true.
Going deep into like family history, vital signs, your waist circumference. Then it also talks a lot about checking your blood and getting the rough ranges for like if you have a metabolic disease. If you're listening to this and you're like interested in diagnosing yourself or seeing if you have any sort of metabolic syndrome, it'd be worth picking up the book just to sort of read this chapter alone.
Because I think like a lot of what he was going on was saying that like the way that we currently understand, like the fact that these diseases have no names, it means that we're less likely to actually even test for them, or doctors would test for them. And so there's a better, more accurate way by doing a test and looking for specific things that actually show the underlying.
Exactly. That would potentially identify you as somebody with a metabolic syndrome. And then therefore, if you can then sort of classify yourself as might have it, you can then go and get further tests, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So and then we move on to chapter 10, which was foodable and not druggable. I mean, we pretty much touched this already. So there are 3 key characteristics shared by all diseases classified as metabolic syndrome. One is, despite efforts to combat them, these diseases are increasing in incidence, prevalence, and severity at a faster rate than obesity. Number 2, while obesity may exacerbate them, it is not necessarily the sole cause of these diseases. And 3, although drugs are available to address the symptoms of these diseases, including obesity, there are no medications that can effectively treat, cure, or prevent the diseases themselves. So when examining the underlying biological processes at the subcellular level, all of these diseases are driven by specific components of food, and as a result can be influenced by dietary interventions with real food, which can effectively penetrate the cells where they are needed. It is a common misconception that supplements can counteract the effects of poor food choices, which is actually it's funny that, isn't it? But it's such a classic. People are like, I'm going to take my multivitamins and I'm going to eat vegetables. I mean, I was like that in the past. However, real food should be considered as the treatment, while unhealthy food should be seen as the poison. Simply relying on supplements is not sufficient to address the root cause of metabolic syndrome, and a holistic approach that prioritizes whole, nutrient-rich food is essential for managing and preventing these diseases. I mean, we said this so many times in this book now, I don't know if it needs repeating anymore, that this is like, it's obvious, right? And I think we said there's an exercise in the other books you're reviewing where like all these diseases are going up and up and up, and nothing we're doing in terms of medication wise is there's not preventing it. It's just like we said many times, it's just treating the current symptoms, right? Like
absolutely,
it's trying to make it more livable to live with these sort of diseases, but these diseases are dietary like made, right? It's absolutely the writing's on the wall. It's like it's almost to the point where it's so obvious now that you can't really deny it. It's almost a bit like the tobacco industry back in the day as well. Like, it's definitely not cigarettes that are causing all these like lung cancer cases. And then eventually the writing's on the wall just like, of course it is. It just makes sense. Like just compare the diets of the people who have got these metabolic syndromes to the people who don't, and then you probably see the difference immediately by lifestyle choices, right? Like they live like ultimately. Don't get me wrong, I do believe there's a genetic component. Like some people can put away easier, some people more susceptible to certain things, right? But at the end of the day, the lifestyles of the people who are fit and healthy would be a lot different to the people who aren't fit and healthy, right? And it's a combination of all these things, but obviously food is one of the biggest components, because like you were saying before, you can't outrun a sort of really super poor diet with massive amounts of sugar, etc. Right?
No, it is interesting, and it's interesting how like people try to argue it, right? Like saying, well, the diagnostic tools have changed. So now we're able to, we didn't have these diagnostic criteria back in the day. And so we didn't know so many people were ill. But it's like, well, yeah, okay, well then ask people from that generation whether they came across so many people that were ill, and they'll say no. And so I'm pretty sure that's a great, like, how many people are obese today compared to how many obese people were obese back then. I mean, like, it's not hard to identify, but it's just funny the like counter arguments that people like engage in to try and be like, oh no, that's not the case. I mean, like the US, I think it was in this book, they said that 80% of the US are on some kind of medication, and like 54 or something, 54% are on multiple types of medication, which once again, just like, already, that like there's so many flaws in how these drugs are tested, and they're never tested with other drugs, are they? Like, or very few.
Yeah, it's just, it's crazy, isn't it? And do you know what? There's actually a book we should definitely get onto reading. I was watching a couple of podcasts. It's called Brain Energy, and it's this guy who's basically arguing that a lot of like ADHD, or maybe not ADHD, but like depression is actually caused by obviously diet. Once again, it's going to be very well linked to this. Yeah. It's very much like the increase in all these mental health issues. Obviously, you can argue stuff like social media, right? But it's also dietary as well. I think he's basically arguing for that. Maybe we should visit that at some point as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, I mean, once again, it's once you read sort of this book and stuff, you kind of just see like it is all linked. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's some holes to be pointed out with some of these arguments. I'm sure 100%. But I mean, the writing's on the wall in terms of the situation, like socially, with all these illnesses, with these rising diabetes rates and stuff. Like it's just, I think for me, at least, that's probably undebatable, really, of what's causing it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I just think, like, you shouldn't go to something unless you've done all you can to try and diminish the environmental factors. And although we're misled about what these environmental factors are, like you said earlier on, we kind of know. It's just whether we want to.
I think deep down we do, don't we? Yeah. I think it's one of those things that, like, we've all come to sort of realize, like, if somebody's overweight, they're realizing that they're probably, one, eating too much, and probably eating the wrong things as well, right? They're not dumb. Like, I don't think anybody's like.
If you're eating McDonald's or chips or deep fried things all the fucking time, you probably are aware that, like, I know I could eat better.
Yeah, but do you know what I think it is? I think a lot of it actually is they think they just reduce it once again back to this classic, like, it's the calorie content or it's the fats. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just eat a lot of fatty food, but it's actually, no, you're actually eating stuff that's causing oxidative stress to your body, and it's dysregulating your cells, and therefore from that your body's not metabolizing correctly, and therefore you're putting on more fat quicker than other people. And then other people, they'll probably say something along the lines of, but it's genetic, it's run in my family. Yes, there is probably a genetic component to it, but obviously you putting all that stuff in your body is not exactly helping it, as we know, because it's damaging it. And if it's damaging it, I'm sure your genes are being expressed wrongly. And I'm not saying, like, I feel like that's probably actually one of the things that actually the genetic component has. You're just genetically more susceptible to this damage or to this stress. Your body is more susceptible to for oxidative stress to run rampant, and you end up with insulin resistance or something like that. Do you get what I mean? I feel like that's where the genetic component comes in. It's just you're more susceptible to this specific subcellular pathology of one of the 8 or a cluster of them, And some people are less susceptible, right? Like, you could argue maybe somebody like me and you, who obviously struggle or have struggled, maybe this would change in the future, but to like put on weight massively, like, arguably we don't eat massively shit food. Like, sometimes we do, but I've never really thought, even when I was younger, apart from that one, the time with the bloody 2,000 calorie protein shakes, I actually put on weight. I mean, that showed me, like, my level. I could eventually get to the point where I put on weight, but it requires, like, really excess. But yeah, like, in my head, it's just that was probably fucking, like, thinking about all the what you call it, like the ingredients in that, like protein, like serious mass thing. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine what that was doing to my body. Like,
you wouldn't have been able to have that much without the fiber. I mean, like, that is almost
that's a very good point. You're right. No, you are right.
It's because it's condensing a meal. It's a concentrated meal, essentially.
You're right as well, because I think it wasn't in this. Was it in this book?
I think it was, when he talks about, like, different types of proteins that you get from protein.
Yeah, but it also more like the satiatingness or the satiating of fiber in general. Like, fiber actually sends a signal to your brain that, like, you've eaten, kind of thing. Whereas things with reduced fiber, kind of, it doesn't even get that, your brain doesn't get a signal saying, like, you've had some food, you should probably slow down. Like it doesn't send like a hunger quenching or hunger reducing signal, whereas stuff with high in fiber does.
Absolutely,
which is interesting because that's another approach that he doesn't really talk about too much in this book. But I've heard from other books. I can't remember which one it was, but they were talking about like hungry brain or something. And like once again, it's all interlinked, of course. Like it's
I mean, like as we saw in the exercise books, like how much sleep plays a part in the whole, like, satiety, the regulation of like ghrelin and I think it's leptin or something, the things that make you feel full or say that your appetite is small or big. I mean, like they're all interconnected at the end of the day. And what I find really interesting in this current book that I'm reading is this, link to, how people's metabolic issues can kind of be traced back to their parents' diet. I mean, that's what's fascinating because like, if you were to say, if your parents don't eat that well or eat a very Western diet, then you can also identify, well, I wonder whether if I change this, I will see benefits, or I will see also that like my kids will change. Like that's I feel like, we stop at the individual. We don't look we look at family history, but we look at family history in terms of like what's happened rather than what was their behavior, right?
I guess you could argue family's history also stays consistent, not just through genetic components, because obviously they share the same genes, but also the same environment, right? Because a lot of families extend like their habits then get expressed to their children.
Absolutely.
Because they eat the same food, like for most of their life they're not going to be able to cook, right? So therefore their environment's almost shared.
100%.
So it's not just like, I mean, obviously there's always that classic argument like, oh, it's the family genes, but it's also like, no, it's also the family environment where you're eating the same food every day. You're I mean, obviously there is the gene part, but obviously if they've got the results they have, like they put on weight because of their genes interacting with their environment, and you've got the same genes and you've got the same environment, you're obviously going to get fat.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Like
absolutely.
It might not even be the gene's fault really, because obviously if they're expressed in a different way and the environment was different through epigenetics or whatever you want to call it, they wouldn't have these problems. But it's because obviously the genetics is the same, the lifestyle environment's the same. It's like it's insanity to think anything else is going to be different unless you've completely changed the diet for your kids, like
absolutely. I find that whole thing fascinating, and it's just I find this whole area really interesting. So then onto this last part here. So diabetes, the modern scourge. So the consumption of refined carbohydrates, particularly dietary sugar, is strongly associated with the development of type 2 diabetes. In fact, dietary sugar, more so than starch, is known to trigger the metabolic reactions that contribute to the onset of type 2 diabetes, particularly through its effects on mitochondria. So I think earlier on when we were talking about mitochondria, we were talking about how what was it? It was one of those subsystems that was talking about the lock and key, wasn't it? Allowing the cell to have energy, essentially, so that mitochondria can can function properly. So the next bit. So when glucose from dietary sugar is absorbed, it stimulates the release of insulin, which in turn promotes weight gain. Meanwhile, fructose from dietary sugar drives the accumulation of fat in the liver, leading to the insulin resistance. Processed foods are a major source of these detrimental effects. The conclusion drawn from the comprehensive scientific analysis is that processed food accelerates the progression of 8 subcellular pathologies that underlie metabolic dysfunction, inappropriate cell proliferation, and cell death. On the other hand, nutrition is the overarching paradigm for achieving a long and healthy life free from disease, prioritizing whole, unprocessed foods, and crucial for preventing and managing metabolic syndrome and related conditions, including type 2 diabetes. And I think there was a part in there, I can't remember it, but I think he was saying the amount of people who are now diagnosed with diabetes is just so high. And it's like, I remember being so astounded by it when I came across it, because it was just how much it had increased over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think what's quite interesting as well is so many people who look almost healthy have it as well. Because I used to think the stereotype, obviously, with obesity and diabetes, because they're interlinked, right? Yeah. So a lot of people who are diabetic tended to be, I don't know, at least from my experience, quite big, quite overweight. Yeah. But now there's so many people who aren't overweight at all that you look at them and you almost think they're healthy, but they're not. And it just goes to show that you don't have to be fat or look unhealthy to be unhealthy, right? It's if these subcellular pathways are messed up in some form. Just because you don't have the insulin resistance one, and obviously, just because you don't have the fat accumulation doesn't mean you can't have a insulin resistance, right? Or you can't have some form. Or maybe actually, arguably, then they're actually in the process of about to get fat, because part of obviously when insulin resistance kicked in is you probably put on weight quicker, right? So it's like, oh, they've just been diagnosed with diabetes and now they're going to start getting fat.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, right, like there are 8 subcellular pathways. So different combinations are going to lead to different issues. And some of them might be that like as we were looking at, what was it? Was it AMP-kinase, right? That was looking at whether something should be full or not, as in like whether it should store store energy, right, or burn. And you can imagine how like different dysfunctional pathways lead to different outcomes. Some people might be obese, but they're still and they're sick, and some people may not be obese, but they're still sick, right? Just in a different way. Their pathways aren't saying that we should store fat, but instead of doing something else wrong with it.
They might have like leaky gut syndrome, whatever you said
exactly.
Before, but they might not be fat or whatever. Still doesn't mean they're sick, right? It's that type of thing. Because I've even heard the stories, I don't know if you've ever heard this, with like basically people's organs are like really fat, like they have really sort of like fat
visceral
organs,
fat,
visceral fat, exactly that. And they look thin, but then if you cut into them, they're actually like really like in serious health, in serious trouble, with their health, because it's like their organs aren't functioning properly because there's too much fat deposited, but they look thin.
And it's actually better to have subcutaneous. And that's why what's interesting is you can have people that, maybe have a good diet, right? But eat too much. And so they're fat, but actually they're not ill, right? And that's what's even more interesting, right? And and then when you measure their kind of visceral versus subcutaneous fat, their subcutaneous fat is very high, meaning they look fat, but actually their organs are fine. And that's why sometimes it's funny when like you come across a fat person who's like old, and you'd be like, well, this doesn't add up. But actually, they may just be like quite healthy. They just eat too much. And obviously, it's not good to eat too much. Yeah.
And I guess arguably as well, you could actually have quite good cardiovascular fitness, for example, and still be fat, or still be overweight or whatever you want to call it. But obviously, you're probably quicker if you were, if you had lost weight. You get what I mean? Like you probably be faster or probably more agile, whatever. But it doesn't mean you can't have good cardiovascular health, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting, when you do look at, there is probably like a stereotype that is flaunted about like what is like a beautiful body or what is the ideal body, right? But that may not actually be the case. Like if your organs are working perfectly fine, then it probably doesn't matter too much, in the sense that we see a lot of people who look quite large, like women that look quite large, but actually they're very healthy. Interesting.
There's levels to this, I think. Once again, it's like, you can be slightly overweight, but obviously once it gets to a certain point, even if you're eating healthy, I assume there's some form of like complications that could occur just through having too much body fat, I assume.
So, absolutely.
So let's move on to part 3 then, and then we'll end at the end of this part. So part 3, notes from the nutritional battlefield. Chapter 11, what does healthy really mean? So since the release of The Omnivore's Dilemma by food journalist Michael Pollan in 2006, he has argued that nutrition has become akin to a religion, as it often requires belief without direct observation. So the concept of nutritionism arose with the discovery of the first vitamin, thiamine (B1) in 1912, which led scientists to believe that food contains both beneficial and detrimental chemicals. This has resulted in the belief that nutrients are the fundamental elements of any dietary approach, giving rise to the phenomenon of nutritionism. Many nutrition experts and pundits have often have vested interests in promoting certain dietary approaches, either by selling drugs, supplements, or diets. If they have financial investments, in today's age of declining lifespan and health span, nutritional mythologies become particularly fervent, with people seeking someone or something to blame, including the author of this statement. It is true, isn't it? Like this whole, I mean, even I abide by it to some levels, like omega-3 and vitamin C, like all this sort of stuff. It's interesting because obviously people, what they've done as well is they've liked to like isolate certain ones and be like, this is the one you have to have. Whereas the reality is, once again, if you have like a varied diet, you get all the vitamins you need, and it's all to do with like balance, right? Like, I mean, if you overdose on anything, it's going to cause you bloody issues. So it's just it's more like finding out the ones that you're missing from your diet, right? In my head, and the ones that you actually have to have, like things you have to have for survival, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, there wasn't fucking hunter-gathering societies like dying because they lacked certain vitamins. Obviously, if you were like starving in a desert or something, you probably would fucking die through something like that. But if these people are eating variations in their diet and like a normal diet, they're getting all of them, right? And it reminds me a bit of the Good to Go book, kind of with all these like misconceptions of like what vitamins actually do.
Yeah.
And just, once again, it's financial vested interests. People think they've, found the next best thing. They want to promote what they found. They want to, a legacy, like the discovering of the vitamin and the importance of it. And,
it's fucking difficult to get around it. I mean, like, if you were eating perfectly healthy diet, then you're probably getting most of your vitamins. But then there's also like, environmental aspects. Like maybe there are environmental factors that diminish some of them, right? So maybe you do need to compensate. Now, you could probably do that by eating, but it's also, like you said, figuring out what you kind of lack. I mean, if you were to look at hunter-gatherers, I mean, they moved around, and they probably evolved to that area. So they were getting all their vitamins. It's just so difficult to figure out what you need, what you don't need, and like,
and that's hard to isolate. Like isolate, removing it from a cell in a living body. Like, how do you even track this shit? Like, do you get what I mean? Like, I want to know exactly how they do all this measurement and stuff. Like, is it subjective as well? I'll be given more vitamin C, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I feel better." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, like I gave them vitamin C and they recovered from their illness quicker. How do you define recovery from illness? Is it their subjective state? Is it their like biological signs of blood pressure or whatnot? It's all up to like interpretation. I can't imagine the complexity of trying to discern like the individual effect of a specific vitamin. And then also once again, this is all to do with because there's been arguments with certain vitamins, right? How they get absorbed. So it's like, okay, this one can be absorbed if this is fat soluble, this isn't soluble. Therefore, like you could even be taking stuff which doesn't even get digested because it's not fat soluble or something. Do you get what I mean? It's like it's almost back to placebo, isn't it? It's like we just do it because we think it's going to work rather than actually knowing how it works, because we just put stuff in our body. And in my head, I always used to think, right, it's going into a fucking tub of acid. Like, how does it survive?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like, how is this being like, oh, look, like there's like things swimming through the acid being like, oh, look, vitamin A, let's take it. Do you get, this is a very naive like approach to it, but it's just like, somebody's got to like ask these questions, right? Like, I'm a bit like, what?
Absolutely. And there's so many like derivatives of the same thing, right? And then also they're, like you said, absorbed differently, or we know how some are absorbed and some aren't. So like I was listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan. I guess you
could put it in like a tub of acid, couldn't you? You could just like drop it. You could drop it in, like recreate the process and see if it gets completely denatured or whatever. And
but then like once again, like even then, like how do we know that before it gets to that point that it's not absorbed elsewhere? That's a difficult thing. I was listening to this podcast with Joe Rogan and Robert F. Kennedy, and he was talking about how one of the vaccines they used to put mercury in vaccines. Now we know that mercury is incredibly toxic, right? And he's a litigator, and so he was like ringing up this company that creates vaccines and was putting mercury in them, and he was like, oh look, how do you know that like mercury isn't affecting this? And it's like, oh well, this kind of mercury doesn't get absorbed because there was a study that couldn't find the mercury, and it was only then later on that they did this other study by giving this derivative of mercury to somewhere, and they couldn't find it anywhere in these people's body. And then once they died, they were able to like do an autopsy on their brain and realize that it was absorbed in their brain. So it's like, once again, there's another level to it. Like we say we know what we know about a vitamin, but actually what about
no idea,
right? Like, so it's it's always like I can imagine it's an incredibly complex area and difficult. And if you see, I feel like if you hear a person say something like, this is it, this is how it works, it's the best thing you have, I mean, it's just too simple. There's probably a lot more complexity to it, but yeah. So anyway, on to nutrition mythology. Yeah. So individuals with metabolic syndrome often face the paradox of being both overnourished and undernourished. Despite consumption despite consuming ample calories, they may suffer from deficiencies in essential amino acids such as tryptophan, which is needed for serotonin production, and methionine, which is crucial for glutathione synthesis, a potent liver antioxidant. The prevalence of nutrition mythology over truth can be attributed to various reasons, including limitations in nutritional epidemiology, which is often conducted by pundits in the field who are not bench scientists or clinicians. Epidemiological studies focus on correlation rather than causation, akin to John Snow's cholera investigation of the Broad Street pump, serving as a starting point for posing important questions. However, answering these questions requires proper study design, as correlation alone does not imply cause and effect relationships. Reverse causality, intermediate causality, or other confounding factors may be at play, leading to misleading interpretations. And this is where, most of the time when you're eating food, you're taking multiple vitamins in at the same time, right? And so, like you said, trying to find the impact of one particular vitamin must be very difficult because it probably interacts with many others.
Yeah, exactly. Same time, right? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Despite this, the media often portrays epidemiological studies as causation, further contributing to public misconceptions. Some researchers and news sources rely on meta-analyses, considered the gold standard in providing a point by consolidating multiple studies. However, the reliability of meta-analyses depends on the quality of the underlying data, which can be compromised when influenced by industry interests, leading to the principle of garbage in, garbage out. Most nutritional studies rely on self-reported data obtained through food questionnaires. So it's kind of what you talked about before. It's what's your subjective interpretation of recovering from something, right?
But it's also a bit asking them what did they eat the other day, and it's just I fucking this is. I
can't remember.
I don't even remember.
Literally. So most nutritional studies rely on self-report data obtained through food questionnaires, which are prone to inaccuracies due to memory recall issues. Asking individuals about their food intake over a period of time often yields unreliable results, as people struggle to recall their dietary habits accurately. Furthermore, unintentional biases or intentional misreporting may further impact the data quality. So, in conclusion, the science of nutrition has been muddled by various factors, including limitations in nutritional epidemiology, misleading media portrayals, reliance on meta-analyses based on compromised data, and inaccuracies in self-reported data from food questionnaires. Careful consideration and critical evaluation of research findings are necessary to discern truth from nutrition mythology. And I mean, we've come across that in multiple areas, even in exercise. I mean, it's the same thing everywhere. It is.
It's just if you actually think about how the process you have to go through to try and discern, or to try and tease out the variables you're measuring and trying to keep things controlled, bearing in mind also when you're doing stuff on different subjects with different genetics which react differently to specific things, you've got to be there's just so much complexity here. It's almost an impossible task to some degree. And part of me does worry that a lot of it is also just there for legal sort of hand washing, oh look, I've done the study, I can prove that it was safe according to my study. And then if you could do a lot of them, you can eventually just be look, this is truth because I've done this many studies, even if they're badly done. I guess part of it's just proving it's not dangerous, right? But once again, nothing's ever tested over a long enough period of time to know if stuff's dangerous, right? And this is there's I don't know, the more you think, when you actually look at it and you think and you go okay, right, so what are they trying to figure out here? How are they trying to figure it out? How long do they test this for? How do they even know it's safe? How do they know it's working? It's these questions are still unanswered most of the time. Or at least there's no consensus answer for any of it. It's a bit well, and then you have to trust somebody to be oh, we've actually got the truth of this, and this is what everybody should do based off what we think is the truth. But
that's the thing. I feel science has to be incredibly granular. Right, taking tiny steps, basically using a study, and then basically almost using the same exact variables, and then only a tiny little change.
But that's what good science, I think, is as well. Because you do a study, and then it brings up a point that you're oh wow, now I need to investigate this.
Exactly,
change this.
Exactly. But it's so granular. I feel a lot of the time, especially with this kind of, the science that is paid for by a lot of these companies, is that, it's not a sexy result. You want a finish line. You want to go from here to here rather than from
but
here
people
to
also
here.
Stuff also gets misrepresented. If they do a study and there isn't a statistically valid conclusion anyway, somebody will just take the abstract, cut a bit where they propose something and be like, oh, look, this shows this, and it kind of just gets or, you know, I guess you could say people get misinformed by it. I guess they do to some extent, but they're just, it's maddening to think the actual complexity of this type of thing with the myriad of different ways these different vitamins, like there's so many different vitamins as well, how they all interact with each other. Like, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I mean, obviously there's a lot more people who like spend their life studying this type of stuff, right? And they obviously know more, right? But it's just like, it's maddening to think how hard it must be to discern like the different effects they have and stuff. And, you know, obviously like people write all these times that this vitamin does this is the role this one has, but there could even be smaller components within the vitamin that does the specific thing. You know, do you get what I mean?
Exactly.
At what point do you know if it's not broken down further? To like a separate two molecules, like it has like a vitamin V1 that's broken down to two, and this does this does that. Do you get what I mean? Like, where does it end? Because technically we don't even know what's smaller than like, you know, electrons and shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you get really down into the very nitty gritty, it's like I don't even know what that is. Like, I don't know where it stops. But anyway, let's get on to something a bit more practical then. So like, Robert's definition of healthy. So the key to preventing chronic diseases lies in optimizing the 8 subcellular pathways obviously discussed before, and achieving this can be accomplished through 2 simple guidelines. So number 1 is safeguard the liver. So protection of the liver from various stressors such as fructose, glucose, branched-chain amino acids, omega-6 fatty acids, and iron is crucial to prevent fat accumulation, liver damage, and insulin resistance. This can be achieved by either reducing the intake of dietary liver stressors, such as adopting a low-sugar diet, or reducing their flux, for example, by incorporating a high-fiber diet that blocks sugar absorption, which is a really good point here, like reducing the glucose spikes, for example, thus slowing down the rate at which fructose and branched-chain amino acids reach the liver. And number 2 is nourish the gut. So properly nourishing your gut's microbiome is essential, as a healthy microbiome can disrupt the protective mucin layer that shields the intestinal epithelial cells, leading to the leaky gut, inflammation, and increased insulin resistance. To promote gut health, it is important to provide adequate nutrients to the microbiome farther down the intestine, which could be achieved through a high fiber diet that supports a healthy gut microbiome. And that's a good point, because my understanding was fiber doesn't get fully digested, and therefore allows itself to get into the gut and therefore feed the microbiome there, right? And obviously anything without anything low fiber is going to cause the microbiome to sort of be starved almost, right?
Absolutely. It takes longer to kind of like digest, and also it goes further down the intestine, which means that the other nutrients are able to travel through rather than like falling out beforehand, right?
Yes, exactly that. So by following these 2 simple directives of protecting the liver and nourishing the gut, one can optimize the functioning of the subcellular pathways and significantly reduce the risk of chronic disease. Fiber is a vital nutrient that benefits not only you, but your microbiome. There are 2 types of fiber found in real food: soluble fiber, which is the globular in nature and resembles the consistency of jelly, e.g. psyllium, pectin, inulin, and insoluble fiber, which is stringy in nature and similar to the fibers found in celery, which is cellulose chitin. I don't know how to pronounce that. Peptidoglycan. Both types of fiber. These words, man. Whoever comes up these. There is some logic behind it. I'm pretty sure, like the pep. Do you get what I mean? There is going to be some
Latin
reason behind it. So both types of fiber serve different functions and are essential for overall health. Intact fiber, which is found in real food, offers numerous benefits beyond just producing short-chain fatty acids. In the processed food industry, the germ of the grain, which contains nucleic acid, flavonoids, and polyphenols, is often removed along with the fiber because it become rancid. And I think we spoke about this before, maybe on the last podcast, but fiber is one of the things that actually breaks down and causes food to go off. So therefore, by removing it, it increases the shelf life. These are the 2 simple principles to follow for optimal health: protect the liver, feed the gut. Real food, which is low in sugar and high in fiber, fulfills both of these requirements. In contrast, processed food, which is high in sugar and low in fiber, fails to meet these criteria, and therefore does not support the liver or nourish the gut. I mean, it does. Once again, this is pretty fucking decent, easy to follow advice, right? It's just like eat real foods, high in fiber, reduce the amount of sugar. It doesn't really, you can't really get more simple and practical than that, really, to be honest. And once again, I don't think even here he's saying like, cut out sugar forever, and like, I'm not a big believer in that. He's just like, make sure that you're eating a high fiber, low sugar diet in general. over the course of the week, that is, as long as you're like standing by that over the course of the month or something like that, you're fine. It's like you can have a day where you go and have lots of sugar, but make sure you're eating that with fiber if you can. But if not, make sure the rest of the time it's high fiber, low sugar. And
this is what I would actually love, is like how to, because it's impossible to get away from this stuff, right? I mean, like sugar's in almost everything, as well as like vegetable oils. I mean, like you can't go to any restaurant, cafe or whatnot that doesn't cook it because it's expensive, right? And they're cost efficient. So if you accept the fact that people will eat these things now and again, and you should try to reduce it, but if you're going to eat it now and then, how best to almost counteract the impact? So I've kind of been doing this thing this week where, like, because I've been on set, I'll be eating some things and I know that they've got vegetable oil. So then I go and have something that I know is kind of like antioxidants, right? Like straight after. So I don't know whether it does anything. I don't know whether it stops.
No, I'm sure. We never did that book, did we? The Jessie Echarpe, the one you sent me about the glucose. She has a book, I can't remember what it's called. The Glucose Revolution. She talks a lot about that. Like she gives very specific recommendations, for example, not just before eating like fatty. What was it? Sorry, it was like vegetable oils. Did you say?
Yeah.
Like anytime you eat sugar, like she even talks about like vinegar. Vinegar reduces your like blood glucose spike.
Interesting. And wasn't that why you were eating greens just before carbs?
I'm not as good as I should be with that, but we try now buy like a big lettuce, chop it up and just leave it in a box, and before you eat something you grab like a handful of it.
I quite like that.
Like I don't know, I trust like from all this stuff and all these different books, like triangulating my opinion based off it. I think this like idea of high fiber food and prioritizing that, and I do believe when Jessie Echarpe says that like having high fiber before the sugar also reduces the spike, that makes logical sense for me as an extension, and therefore I'm probably not going to notice the difference, but I'm still going to trust that it's making a difference over the long run. Once again, it's like, it's the small habits that make the difference. If you do it again, I'm sure it has a cumulative effect that's actually quite different.
No, 100%. No, I back that.
Yeah. And obviously, like, it's funny, isn't it? Because all these books, like, from at least, maybe we're really reading only into one perspective, but it seems to be a common perspective from multiple different people, not in the same side of kind of space as well. Do you kind of get? I mean, she's specifically in like the glucose space. You got Gary Taubes, or his name specifically in the obesity space, but also diabetes as well. To be fair, then you've got like these exercise books, where it's like the hunter-gatherer perspective, the anthropological perspective. We're putting them all together, and to be honest, there is like a common pattern across all of them, right? And that's kind of why we have these opinions that we do now. It's like, and we can read books like this, which kind of reveal even more the cultural side to it as well, like the incentive side behind it, but also at the same time going into like the biology of what's actually causing it. And once again, like I said, maybe not all of it's 100% correct, but there's irrefutable evidence in my head now that there is something wrong with the way we eat food. And I don't care if this like subcellular stuff isn't 100% correct. There is definitely something along these lines related to processed food that's causing. It's just like
Absolutely. And it gives you a better guide, right? Like it just points you in the right direction. It doesn't say exactly this is it and this is what because like you said, we're reading multiple books. It just points us in the right direction. The further you go down that route, the more you're like, oh, okay, I've got a much better understanding of this.
Exactly that. And once again, you get like these practical recommendations, like, low sugar, high fiber. I mean, this is stuff that's like kind of like, once again, almost becoming the new alternative medicine, alternative nutrition, alternative. Do you get what I mean? It's like, it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent. Like more and more people believe this stuff. And I think there's a reason why, is because it's true.
No, absolutely.
And they're finding results.
So on to the next part. So chapter 12, Nutrition Unwrapped. So the notion that a calorie is a myth, and here are 5 examples that disprove it. It's kind of what we were talking about earlier. So number 1, fiber. When you consume almonds, which contain 160 calories, your body only absorbs 130 calories. The remaining 30 calories are not absorbed early in the duodenum, which is early intestine, due to the fiber present in almonds. Instead, the fiber prevents the absorption, allowing bacteria in the jejunum and the ileum, middle and late intestine, to utilize them for their own purposes. Although you consumed these 30 calories, they are not counted as calories that you actually obtained. Your gut bacteria did. Number 2, protein. Amino acids from protein need to undergo a process in the liver to be converted into organic acids, such as aspartate and oxalic. Oh my God, I'm just going to go over that one. For energy and metabolism. This conversion process requires 2 ATPs, whereas carbohydrate requires only 1 ATP. This phenomenon is known as the thermic effect of food, TEF. Protein has much higher TEF compared to fats and carbohydrates, ranging from 25 to 30%. This means that it takes more energy to burn protein compared to carbohydrates.
Do you know what? That's an interesting one, because I remember I didn't know where I heard it from, but I remember my parents always used to tell me that, for example, if we were eating beef, they'd be like, oh, that's going to take a couple of days to be digested. I have no idea where they got that information from. I believed it for a long period of time.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're eating that so quick, and you're eating it in such big chunks. It's going to take days to, because I inhale my food, so I would eat it in like really big chunks. They're like, that is going to take days to digest, Jess. And I was like, nah. But there is obviously then some truth to the fact that it might take, and it kind of makes sense. If you put a lump of beef in like a tub of acid, it's probably slower to digest than I don't know, a leaf at the same amount of weight, right? It's
That's really interesting. I also wonder whether like your parents knew that from like scientifically, or whether it's one of those interesting like traditional kind of things that are passed down. Like someone's like,
I was gonna say wives' tales, but it's probably acceptable to say wives' tales these days.
It's like folklore, right? And like that's a lot of where it's what kind of guides science is prior to science, right? Like these things come about like
prior theories that people then test, right? They're like, oh, is this true? Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Number 3, fat. While all dietary fats would theoretically release 9 calories per gram when burned, not all fats are utilized in the same way. Omega-3 fatty acids, for example, are not burned for energy. Instead, they are stored as they are essential for cell membranes and neurons in the brain. Additionally, trans fats cannot be burned, as humans lack the enzymes to break the trans double bond. Now, isn't that really interesting? Like that, literally, like an omega-3 just can't be stored as fat. So already that completely disproves the whole calorie as a calorie thing, right? It says like different calories or different nutrients have different like functions. I find that so interesting. Number 4, sugar. Added sugar consists of equal amounts of glucose and fructose. Although both provide the same number of calories, they are metabolized differently in the liver and have distinct roles in the brain. Glucose can be utilized by all tissues in the body, with only 20% of glucose load going to the liver, where it is converted into glycogen, which is liver starch, under the influence of insulin. On the other hand, fructose can only be metabolized by the liver, resulting in the entire fructose load being processed by the liver. This can overwhelm the mitochondria, leading to liver fat accumulation and driving insulin resistance, as insulin has little effect on fructose metabolism. And that's another like really interesting point, because I think most processed foods or most added sugars are actually fructose because it's cheaper. And so, if you're eating a lot of that, that's overwhelming.
I also think it's actually tastier as well.
I think it's sweeter.
It's more. If I remember correctly, it's a denser form of energy. Like it's like a glucose attached to something else. A glucose and a sucrose, maybe, I can't remember. But I remember reading it in it was the Jessie Sharpe book, but she was basically saying that it's a more condensed version, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because then you can imagine how eating all these foods can lead to overwhelming the liver, which then ends up just having like causing insulin resistance, and then diabetes is the next step, right? And then lastly, number 5, different fat depots. It is depots, right? Is that how you say it? I don't know. It's not just about whether a calorie is stored, but also where it is stored. There are 3 types of fat depots in the body: subcutaneous fat, found in the buttocks; visceral fat, found in the belly; and liver fat. Each of these depots poses different risks for the development of metabolic diseases. Subcutaneous fat requires a significant amount, about 22 pounds, to negatively impact health. So what we were saying earlier, like, there is obviously like a limit to how fat you can be without having underlying, subcellular issues. And then whereas visceral fat, around 5 pounds, and liver fat, as little as 0.3 pounds, can have detrimental effect on health with much smaller amounts. Furthermore, most of the calories from added sugar tend to accumulate as liver fat. God, that's so interesting, isn't it? So like literally there is such a small threshold for the liver to suffer or to have too much fat. And it's saying that most added sugars.
I was going to say, I wonder how this dynamic plays out with obviously your liver being stressed through high sugar diets, but also alcoholic diets. Because
alcoholic as well, right?
Yeah, so many people drink alcohol, and obviously that causes liver damage, right?
Yeah.
Liver damage from that, liver damage from the high sugar. I can imagine, an environment where people eat a high sugar diet and drink a lot of alcohol, aka a lot of the normal people's like diet.
Well, also think that like, sorry, go on.
No, that was it. It's just like the combination of the two. I can't imagine it's very good for your liver.
And we pair these things with so much sugar anyway. It's like we think about cocktails and like, we mix them with, mixes like Coca-Cola and Sprite and all these kinds of different ones. It's so, it's a double whammy. It's, fully like hitting the liver there.
I'm sure that actually there could be something involved in that. I would have thought that obviously if the liver's dysregulated as well, might, caused by both the alcohol and the sugar.
Yeah.
We're not kind to our bodies. Basically, I think the crux of all this, So moving on to the next part, which is pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. The distinction between pharmacokinetics, which refers to how the body processes a drug, and pharmacodynamics, which relates to how a drug affects the body, is crucial. While there is pharmacokinetic data available for diet sweeteners to assess short-term safety, as mandated by the FDA, there is a notable lack of information on the long-term effects, which falls outside the FDA's scope. The reality is that we do not have a comprehensive knowledge of how these diet sweeteners impact factors such as long-term food intake, body weight, body fat, or metabolic health. The reason for this gap in research is that conducting such studies can be costly, and the food industry, which manufactures and sells these sweeteners, often avoids funding them to safeguard sales. I mean, that's a good point. If they could, if they investigated it and then were like, actually, wait, by the way, this is terrible for you in the long run, that's not exactly going to help, although I'm sure people will still eat it. The responsibility is shifted to the NIH, but they argue that it is the food industry's responsibility. Consequently, these critical studies are left undone. Furthermore, health concerns related to diet sweeteners tend to be overlooked. A report from the University of Sussex revealed that during the original approval of aspartame by the European Food Safety Authority, 100% of the studies indicating harm from aspartame were disregarded, while 84% of the studies showing no harm were accepted. This highlights the potential for selective acceptance of research fundings, raising concerns about the validity of safety assessments for diet sweeteners. And this once again is something we already touched upon earlier. Like we just don't know the long-term effects because obviously, and also it's almost impossible to do a long-term controlled study because you can't just control, these guys only eat sweeteners, these guys only eat this. And also then there's the ethics involved in feeding somebody just sweeteners for like 20 years. You get what I mean?
Already we showed that most of these diet things are quite difficult to test for because it's based on like self-report and like post post food. So what did
and also you have to trust if people stick to the diet, right? The way I see these studies get played out, they're not just like stuck in a lab and only force fed. Maybe they are, maybe I'm wrong, right? But like there comes a point where especially if you're doing a long-term study, you can't just have somebody in a lab for like 3 years eating just this food and controlling everything else, controlling their exercise, controlling their other lifestyle choices, because technically the only best way to isolate these two variables would be literally doing that. They eat exactly the same thing apart from one of them has like an extra sweetener, and they do exactly the same amount of exercise, the exactly same thing every day to control every other variable, which obviously is just impossible, and that's a scientific standard I don't think we're ever going to be able to hit. But still, it's just, I don't know.
Yes, it's so long. Longitudinal studies are just so difficult to control for the other variables because there's just so much at play.
It's almost like the experiment of just a capitalist market is enough to show that there's these things happening. This is what people tend to eat when they, choose like the high sweet. This is the increase in obesity. Like, I don't know. This is once again why we both believe that there's obviously an issue here, because it's like, okay, well, let's just look at what's actually happening in real life. This is what people mainly eat when they're left to their own accord because it's tastier. And look at the prevalence of health issues. Okay. Right. Okay. Do you think there's a link? Oh, no, I don't think so.
No, absolutely not. No.
Not at all.
It's typical. Fucking hell. Do you want to do this next bit?
Go for it. So A fiber is not a fiber. Ooh. As previously mentioned, there are two types of fiber, soluble and insoluble, and both are essential for a healthy diet. The reason why doctors advocate for a plant-based diet is not solely because of the plant origin itself, but rather because plants naturally contain both types of fiber. When these two types of fiber come together, they form a gel-like substance in the duodenum, which reduces the absorption of nutrients in the intestine by 25 to 30%, thereby providing protection to the liver. In return, a significant portion of what you consume remains in the intestine, providing nourishment for the gut bacteria, allowing them to thrive and flourish. However, it's important to be cautious of processed foods that claim to have added fiber in them. While the food industry may add back some soluble fiber, such as the psyllium found in Fibre 1 bars, they cannot replicate the insoluble fiber that is lost during the processing. Once fiber is removed during processing, it cannot be put back, and the benefits of insoluble fiber may be lost in such products. And I thought that's quite interesting. It's like they remove the fiber. They even claiming added fiber, because you do see that sometimes now, right? On some boxes, like added fiber, added this, because once again they've realized that obviously these are beneficial parts. A bit like vitamins, added vitamins to breakfast cereal. That doesn't fucking help. That is full of sugar and crap for you. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe you shouldn't have removed it in the first place.
Agreed. But it's like added fiber, and they're almost playing on the fact that like there is nuance to what's good. If that makes sense. There is a nuance to it. It's not just fiber. There's two types of fiber, right? But they're playing on the fact that people don't know there's like that nuance.
Absolutely.
And it just goes to show you can't remove shit and then put it back. Like it's naive. Why don't you just leave it in there in the first place? But we both know why. It's the shelf life. And I understand that they're trying to solve a problem, right? They're trying to solve a problem of how can we store this food, how can we make sure that we don't waste it, for example, right? And there is a point to be had with all of this, which is like, would the food waste be increased if we didn't do these things to help it be stored? Because would it be able to get to the market quick enough to be able to be eaten, but there could be other solutions to this, right? Do you get what I mean? There could be other solutions that we haven't tried yet. I don't know. I'm not in the industry, but I'm sure there's other things. But once again, it always goes down to what's the cheapest solution, or what's the most profitable solution potentially as well, as we're going to discover later, where they remove stuff and then resell it to, other people, like protein isolate, which I thought was hilarious, that they remove protein, then they sell it as an isolate, and it's just like
fucking ridiculous. And also just like, the demand of the market. I mean, the people want it, so they make it for the people. That whole argument, once again, it's just like, well, technically there should just be a major shift in the way we eat and the way we consume things and what we produce, but like it's not going to happen. I tell you what, another interesting thing that I thought off the back of this Fibre Is Not Fiber is with I think it's soluble, how it reacts to water. I can't remember if it was in this book or a different book, but it was saying that the reason why they can't put in the other type of fiber is that it changes its shape, and so it loses its like benefits, right? And apparently it also loses its shape underwater, like when it's
no, I think it was this one because it talked about maybe when they froze it and then unfroze it lost the fiber, right?
Exactly.
I remember that.
And so I've come across like different kind of diets and that say you shouldn't drink water when you eat, or you shouldn't drink water after a certain period of time after you've eaten, because I don't know why, but I wonder whether
nature the fiber.
Exactly. So even if you're eating stuff, and to be honest, I feel most full when I drink with meals, and I've actually tried to kind of stop drinking with meals because I just find that I suddenly get bloated, and I wonder whether that plays a part, whether that the water is interacting with those, like, I think it's soluble fiber, and it's like changing the shape or whatnot. I don't know, but it would be interesting. I think it was in this book that he was kind of hinting at that.
I definitely remember, I think it was in this book because he talks a lot about the juice and stuff. He talks about how, if you freeze an orange and then unfreeze it, like the membrane falls apart, and that's like an example of how the fiber itself is removed from that process. But I can't remember whether it was because of the water that did it, or it was the act of thawing after being frozen that reduced it or damaged it.
Can't remember. But onwards. So a carb is not a carb. So for many years, the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, and the American Medical Association have promoted a low-fat diet, which inherently translates to a high carbohydrate diet. However, is this trade-off truly beneficial? Just as the concepts of a calorie is not a calorie and a fiber is not a fiber hold true, it's important to recognize that not all carbohydrates are the same, and a carb is not a carb. Sugar versus starch. When comparing sugar to starch, it's important to note that sugars are monosaccharides and disaccharides, consisting of only one or two molecules. In contrast, starch is a complex polymer made up of many molecules. Due to their simple structure, sugars can be quickly digested and absorbed in the duodenum, especially when they are isolated from a food matrix, as is often the case in soda, fruit juice, and alcohol. On the other hand, starch has more bonds to break, leading to slower digestion and absorption. As a result, sugar consumption typically results in a more rapid and high insulin response compared to starch. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier on, right? Like that kind of fiber being like spread throughout the intestine. So that sugar is not absorbed straight away. It can last throughout, and the nutrients can be spread along can last in there for a while.
Yeah.
So type of starch, the two amines. Not all starches are created equal, as there are two types of starch with distinct properties, amylose and amylopectin. Amylose is commonly found in brown foods such as beans, lentils, and legumes, and it is characterized by its slow digestion and absorption. This is because amylose is made up of a string of glucose with two ends, which means that only two enzymes can break it down at a time, resulting in a slower process. On the other hand, amylopectin is typically found in white foods like wheat, pasta, rice, and potatoes, and it is known for the rapid digestion and absorption. Amylopectin resembles a tree of glucoses.
This is super interesting.
This is so interesting, wasn't it? Glucoses with numerous branching points, allowing for many enzymes to break it down simultaneously, leading to a quicker release of glucose into the bloodstream. This rapid release of glucose can potentially overwhelm the liver, resulting in a larger insulin response. In terms of health benefits, amylose is generally considered to be better for you due to its slower digestion and absorption, which helps to regulate blood sugar levels and prevent spikes in insulin. In contrast, amylopectin, with its faster digestion and absorption, may contribute to a more rapid increase in blood sugar and insulin levels.
I mean, that was just, that makes sense, because obviously we've always, been taught that these type of pasta and stuff is a good or quicker form of carbohydrates. I mean, we're going to get onto it in the next section with this glycemic index. But just to know the shape of the molecule is one's like a straight line and one's obviously like a branched a molecule where obviously it can be digested almost, I guess, depending on how many branches is how many times quicker it could be digested. If there's 3 branches, there's 3 at a time, right? If there's 10 branches, it's 10 at a time, right? Or whatever. It's just crazy. And then, so carbs and the glycemic index. I thought it was quite interesting as well, because I've always believed in the glycemic index to some degree. Like, it's kind of the reason why I choose oats over other things. So regrettably, the glycemic index is not the miraculous solution that some enthusiasts claimed it is to be. GI is a measure of how much your blood glucose levels rise in response to 50 grams of carbohydrates in a particular food, compared to the glucose response triggered by 50 grams of pure starch, such as white bread. However, there are several conceptual issues with GI. So GI is an indirect proxy for insulin. While rapid glucose spikes after refined starch lead to glycation and oxidative stress, it's the insulin fluctuation that induces the other 6 subcellular pathologies, which drives the excess energy intake and promotes obesity. GI assumes also everyone responds to the same food in the same way, but GI is computer-based on responses of healthy people to certain foods, even though 88% of people have some form of metabolic dysfunction. Next one is the important parameter is glycemic load. So GL is different from GI. How much food do you have to eat to get the 50 grams of carbohydrate? GL takes into account the beneficial effect of fiber. A good example is carrots, which are high GI, lots of carbohydrate, but low GL, even more fiber. More fiber means a larger portion because there's less digestible carbohydrate. And then fructose. Fructose is a major culprit in the development of liver insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome due to its distinct metabolism in the liver. Unlike glucose, fructose does not raise blood glucose levels when consumed, so it's not measured in glucose assays. In fact, fructose is considered low GI by definition, as it does not contain glucose. However, this fact has not deterred the food industry from attempting to capitalize on the popularity of low GI foods by adding fructose to its various food products.
Yeah. That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, basically just the fact that because it's characteristic means low GI, that they're just capitalizing on it.
And once again, like, it's quite interesting here because obviously the whole point of GI is the insulin response. Sorry, it's the blood glucose level response, to the food, right? And as we've sort of suggested a second ago about, eating this high fiber food first, you can actually reduce the GI response based upon what you like, the order of the food you eat as well. Yeah. So there is other variables that could be taken into account here, but obviously, at the same time, there is something to be said where obviously it's not the be all end all, but obviously something that is digested slower can be arguably more favorable to your body to slowly release the energy rather than obviously like a big sprout, so to speak, or whatever.
And it's probably, like throughout the day, you probably want that. And then if you're doing something that requires a lot of energy, then maybe eat something that has a short, digestion requirement, right? And that's probably why, like, for instance, when people, like, before they run a marathon or whatnot, they eat things that have high fiber. I mean, like nuts and stuff like that.
Okay. There's it's actually interesting as well because the people who run the fastest marathons now have like specially made carbohydrate gels. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No, interesting.
So they're like super rapidly digested.
Yeah.
And basically, apparently, if you eat it without practicing having taking it in, it gives you like diarrhea. So basically, people train doing these like gels. Yeah. To get
that's funny.
Because it's like an instant hit of carbs.
Yeah.
It's literally been designed to be like the most digestible form of carbs you ever have.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite interesting. And these are people obviously doing the elite marathons sort of thing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I'm trying to get an edge.
Yeah, clearly. That's funny.
So yeah, and then the last bit here, do you want to
go? Yes. So a protein is not a protein. So companies are increasingly promoting protein as a miracle solution for weight loss, muscle gain, and overall health. You can find protein in various forms such as shakes, cookies, snack bars, and even coffee. While protein is indeed a vital nutrient necessary for normal growth, it's important to understand that consuming excessive amounts of protein can have negative effects on the kidneys. This is because the kidneys have a limited capacity to eliminate the byproducts of protein metabolism, and over-excretion can potentially lead to kidney damage. Therefore, not only the quantity, but also the quality of protein is crucial. Dietary protein is composed of 20 different amino acids that are combined in varying amounts and combinations. Among these amino acids, tryptophan is particularly important as it serves as a precursor for serotonin, a vital neurotransmitter in the brain. Eggs, poultry, and fish are excellent sources of tryptophan, which, while beans contain relatively low levels of the amino acid. On the other hand, if you are focused on building muscle, you may require additional protein, particularly branched-chain amino acids, such as leucine, isoleucine, and valine, which make up about 20% of the muscle tissue. Corn products are known to be rich in BCAAs and are often found in protein powders sold at health food stores. It's crucial to consider both the type and amount of protein you consume, depending on your specific dietary needs and goals.
I mean, that was, yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, like, I've heard a lot about like corn products there, and like that they're not great for you either. So I wonder whether,
I guess it depends how they're grown, I guess, as well, and how they're extracted, how they're processed. As always, it's never the food itself, it's how what's been done to them, right? As he says at the beginning of this book. It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting part in this current book that I'm reading, and it talks about is it Monsanto? Oh no, it actually wasn't in this book. It was in the podcast with what the fuck is his name, Robert F. Kennedy, and he was talking about Monsanto, which is this company in America, and basically it creates Roundup, and Roundup is this pesticide that is used to create so much grain and corn and stuff like that. And essentially, it's like it was a chemical used after the Second World War during the Second World War to like clean down tanks, because it would just kill everything. And then it was like sprayed on like grass or whatever, and they found that it killed all these green things. So then what they would do is they use that as a pesticide to kill any weeds, and they'd get people to go around like spraying it on the weeds. And then they realized that what they could do is they could genetically engineer it so that it could be sprayed like on a mass field all at once by like a plane or whatnot. And they genetically modified it so that it wouldn't kill the crop that it's being sprayed on. And so basically it's spread all over, and apparently it's been linked to so many health issues. And then now what they do is they've also found out that if they spray it on, because one of the worst things about like harvesting is rain, obviously. And they found that what they can do is they can speed up the process of getting like, grain and corn and whatnot. And by spraying it at the last moment, because it dries it out. And so, once again, like there's been like a massive increase in like metabolic issues and health issues.
No doubt,
based on this kind of Roundup pesticide that's sprayed on it. So that's kind of what I've heard about like corn and like grain.
Once again, it depends on how the food's treated, right? To like
absolutely, the processing stuff, which is exactly what this book's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
cool.
So
I didn't take any notes for chapter 13, which was food in the time of Corona. I didn't really.
I did think it was really applicable. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I got into chapter 14 as what and how adults eat. So there are two primary caveats to using supplements for metabolic syndrome. A supplement can be used to treat a deficiency, but not an excess. And a supplement will work only if it can be absorbed and transported into the cell. And that's something we were talking about earlier. Like, the fact that you could be taking whatever the substance is, but if you're not taking it, for example, if it's fat soluble with fats or whatever, you're reducing the uptake, and therefore you may as well not be, taking it in the first place.
Yeah.
So here are reasons why supplements can't help the 8 subcellular pathways. So glycation, this is due to carbohydrate excess and can't be stopped with just a supplement. Number 2, oxidative stress. So oxygen radicals must be quenched by antioxidants or they will do damage. Many studies demonstrate negative correlations between blood levels of antioxidants and metabolic syndrome, but this can't just be fixed by just adding a supplement. I do wonder whether part of that is the fact that you, with vegetables, right, you're getting the antioxidants in, and the fiber protects them from being like digested or
maybe.
Up. Do you get what I mean? Like the food almost adds a protective layer for it to be digested in.
That's an interesting point.
That's the way it was always been eaten, right? Number 3, mitochondrial dysfunction. So mitochondrial boosters are currently de rigueur, and if they worked, they would be a big win, but they don't. But they don't get where they need to go. So that's another classic. They might not go to the mitochondria. They'll probably end up in your gut or something. Number 4, insulin resistance. Lots of compounds such as alpha lipoic acid, chromium, berberine, bergamot, and resveratrol show promise in animals. However, when the rubber hits the road, the human data doesn't support their use because insulin resistance is due to nutrient excess and not nutrient deficiency. Number 5, you've got membrane integrity. Here we can see some beneficial effects of omega-3 fatty acids because of their role in suppressing inflammation, improving insulin sensitivity, and reducing triglyceride levels, and improving cognitive function. Omega-3s work because they are correcting a deficiency in the Western diet. Number 6, inflammation. So polyphenols such as curcumin are thought to be valuable as they would be correcting a nutrient deficiency. However, the scientific data has been anything but conclusive. One anti-inflammatory that holds promise is vitamin D, which is a specific beneficial effects on the immune system via a set of toll-like receptors. Number 7, epigenetics. So folate has been added to your bread in the grocery store to provide the recommended daily allowance because our processed food diet meant that we were woefully deficient. Pregnant women, people on chemotherapy, and those with specific malabsorption or autoimmune conditions need more. Number 8 as well, autophagy. Spermidine, a polyamine found in cheese and mushrooms, can improve cardiovascular and cancer risk in animals. However, thus far, no formulation has boosted levels enough to get it into the liver of humans. But the best way to increase spermidine in the blood is to change the gut microbiota, which is done with a prebiotic. Just goes
I thought that was a kind of...
It's not like an easy fucking fix for all of this, right? It's not like, take one thing and you're going to be fine,
Yeah.
As much as you want to believe that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So how to repopulate your unhappy gut. So to restore a healthy gut, it's important to repopulate it with probiotics. Probiotics are living bacteria that logically should multiply and thrive once consumed. However, in reality, they don't. Processed food has created an inhospitable environment in the intestines, making it difficult for good bacteria to survive and thrive. It's like sending humans to Mars without an atmosphere. No matter how many probiotics you consume, they won't be able to survive in such an environment. Feeding your gut is essential, and processed foods actually starves it. Increasing processing of food leads to more functional intestinal problems, autoimmune diseases, and metabolic syndrome. Probiotics alone cannot fix this issue because they cannot survive in the unhealthy gut environment. The simplest and most effective solution for a healthy gut is not found in a supplement, but in the dietary fiber. Adopting a high-fiber diet can positively change the microbiome within just a couple of days. When combined with a probiotic that contains a prebiotic, you can create a more ferment if you're taking in all these things. And all these like bad, processes are being dysregulated. All these processes are being dysregulated. You need like a proper environment for it to make the most of.
Yeah. Cool. So moving on to, I think, the last section of this part. So the chapter 15, what and how children and adolescents eat. We can maybe gloss over some of the impact on the kid's brain. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Well, basically, he's trying to argue with that last part. I think that, some of the rises in the cases of ADHD is caused by the effects of the high sugar diet / fructose on the brain. We'll start with the breakfast is a dangerous meal. So breakfast, often touted as the most crucial meal of the day, is a belief that traces back to Leonard Cooper channeling John Harvey Kellogg. However, breakfast does have its merits as it jumpstarts your kid brain in the morning, increasing the thermic effect of food, which accounts for about 10% of energy expenditure, and curbs ghrelin, the hunger hormone, to prevent overeating at lunch. But unfortunately, many breakfast options marketed to kids and their parents, such as cold cereal, instant oatmeal, granola bars, protein bars, and yogurt smoothies, are loaded with sugar. The National Diet and Nutrition Survey has revealed that these seemingly innocent choices can actually contribute to a significant sugar overload, accounting for about half of a child's daily sugar intake on average. To make matters worse, the food industry often conceals the true sugar content through the use of 262 different names for sugar. By incorporating various types of sugar as the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th ingredients, the overall sugar content can quickly add up, making it the dominant component of these breakfast options. But yeah,
it's fucking crazy. 262 different names. I mean, like, how does that not just shout to that, like, there's a flaw, right?
Yeah.
That's so fucked.
There were just like 256 different variations, right? Basically, like just chopping and changing the molecular structure, right? And that's how I'm sort of reading that, to be honest. And then, I'll just go straight into this next bit then. So fructose effects on the brain. The brain, despite weighing just 3 pounds and compromising only 2% of the body's weight, is a voracious consumer of energy, utilizing a significant 20% of all the glucose present in the bloodstream at any given time. However, when it comes to fructose, what does the brain do with it? Well, the majority of fructose is cleared by the intestine and liver, and excessive intake, such as from a large 20-ounce soft drink, can overwhelm their capacities and allow a substantial portion of fructose to enter the brain. Fructose has been found to fundamentally alter brain metabolism, particularly in astrocytes, which are cells that provide nourishment to neurons. Instead of fueling these cells, fructose drives 2 of the 8 subcellular pathologies, namely glycation and oxidative stress. However, it's worth noting that some of the detrimental effects of fructose on the brain can be mitigated by consuming higher amounts of omega-3s, which have been shown to have beneficial effects. Which is, I mean, after reading this book, I was very keen on omega-3 tablets, as you can imagine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And once again, like, that's kind of just the thing that I kind of wanted, right? Like, if I do eat something that has fructose in it, then it's like, just pop a fucking omega-3 or something. But yeah, I was a bit confused there because I thought he said earlier on that fructose is only, or maybe he said it's only
it's only metabolized in the liver, right? But basically, saying,
okay, fine.
You were saying if it exceeds the liver's capacity, then it goes to the brain. Once again, I don't know how true that is, but I can, I don't know. Maybe it is.
Yeah. Okay, fine. That makes sense. Okay, well then, that's kind of it for this section.
I think that is it for this section. Yeah, I mean, we can go to the kid stuff, but it's basically just sort of using the current diet to explain how there's been an increase in people's attention spans and behaviors and causing hyperactivity, for example. And that's another folklore, wasn't it, or folktale, like sugar and your kids becoming so like energetic.
Don't
eat that sugar, you'll be so like highly energized for like 20 minutes.
It's really interesting actually. Like in this current book that I'm reading, she talks about she's talking about autism, right? Because she's talking about the impact of like the Western diet, in particular vegetable oils and sugar, on the brain. And she has like a thesis, or like, a hypothesis that autism is a response of like, okay, let's say the mother is ingesting this Western diet while she's pregnant and while the baby is developing, that instead of basically it will interact with the like development process, and it will mostly affect the brain rather than the organs, because if the organs fail, then the baby essentially dies, right? And there's a miscarriage of some kind. Whereas in a way you can kind of get away with impairing elements of the brain, and in particular she says that like it impacts like social development, right, which is a key player of like autism. But essentially, she's saying that what it is, like what autism is basically just like a tangible, observable symptom of how this diet affects just brain development. And there are multiple other things. There are multiple other issues. It's just autism is one of them, and how it's like how it manifests. And I wonder, like, whether ADHD and all these other things are also just other results.
Developmental issues related to the diet.
And like obviously it's genetic, right? There is a genetic component in autism, but she's just saying that it's like a manifestation of this.
You could argue when your like bodily processes aren't up and fully running, causing any sort of form of this oxidative stress at a young age is probably going to leave you a bit frazzled. Like your body's prioritizing growth, etc., right? Like not stressors. It's
exactly.
It's almost like you're too weak to survive this type of shit. It's
I mean,
makes sense.
The baby is literally taking nutrients from the mother, and then let's say the mother is ingesting things that create free radicals, and then and then like that's causing trouble, and then your body is trying to deal with that while obviously providing nutrients to a baby. Like you can imagine how that's going to stress some situations.
Of course. It makes logical sense, doesn't it?
Nice. But I thought that was good.
I think so. What's the next time? We're moving on to part 4, processed food fights. So I think this gets deeper into the sort of food classifications, what's been done to the food, subtraction. So what the food additions, food subtraction. So what they're adding, what they're removing. What else is coming up? Addictions, the food fraud as well. It gets a bit more juicy, I think, going into this. And then the part after that is part 5, which is where the food police, when you need them, which is talking about the incentives. And it's mainly in America, but obviously I think the UK is quite similar in some aspects to the American system. But all the juicy stuff to get into in part 3.
Cool.
That, listen to that. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Hey guys, well there you have it. We hope you enjoyed that book summary. Now we know it can be a lot to take in all at once, so if you want to be able to read this in a more palatable size, or you want to be able to implement any of those key actionable ideas that we were talking about in this episode, head on over to our website at wisewords.blog, where the book summary will be waiting for you. Also, don't forget to check out our socials, as we consistently upload the key ideas, benefits, and actionable ideas from all the books that we read. The links to those will be in the description below. Now, we want to be able to get you the best content in a way that's really easy to understand, but we need your help. Your opinion matters. So you are our feedback mechanism. And with those quick actions, whether that's leaving us a like or a dislike, commenting in the comment section below, or subscribing to our channel, all of those help us gauge what we're doing well and how to improve on our method of delivery. So if you have any thoughts on the matter, don't hesitate to act. It takes less than 10 seconds and it really helps us out. But with all that being said, until next time, stay wise.